Good morning, everyone. I am Matt Fruman, Ward 3 Council Member and Chairperson of the Committee on Human Services. Today is Tuesday, June 10th, 2025. We are meeting in person in room 123 of the John A. Wilson Building and virtually via Zoom. The time is now 11:19 a.m. Today, we are conducting the budget oversight hearing on the District of Columbia Public Libraries. Libraries are critical third spaces that are uniquely available to every district resident, connecting our neighborhoods and district-wide communities regardless of ward, race, education, ability, or socioeconomic status. Our libraries, unfortunately, won't one of the many agencies affected by the challenges of the current fiscal environment and the proposed FY26 budget. On the operating side, the FY26 DC Public Libraries budget faces a top-line cut of $1.5 million over FY25, and from $78 million to $78 million to $76 million. But this top-line number hides the significant other changes and increasing needs that, when combined with the existing pressures facing our libraries, mean the real cost of this proposed budget could very well force our libraries to reduce hours and be open for fewer days a week. The capital budget offers a beacon of hope with significant increases to finish existing projects like the Petwork Library renovation. The budget also makes investments to ensure that the library continues to build beautiful community spaces across the city, including in Deanwood, Rosedale, Chevy Chase, and more neighborhoods. I'm grateful for the mayor's willingness to invest in the future of our library facilities. However, we also need to make sure that our existing libraries have the funds they need to continue long-term preventive maintenance to ensure our libraries continue to be accessible and flourish for years to come. Finally, there are some changes in the Budget Support Act that we need to discuss here today and going forward with the council to ensure that DCPL is able to use their non-lapsing funds year after year. I'm grateful for this opportunity to hear from residents, employees, and library leadership about the value of our community spaces at MLK and across each ward. I also want to have the difficult conversation about what the proposed cuts and changes will mean for the indispensable program, learning, and community spaces that our libraries uniquely provide. I have just a few notes on logistics. We will start with our in-person and then move to our virtual public witnesses before turning to our government witnesses. Council members will have 10 minutes each to ask a round of questions, and I will generally turn to my colleagues in the order they arrive. We will now start with the public witness testimony, beginning with those here in person. In order to ensure we hear from all members of the public, the committee will strictly apply time limits on witness testimony. All witnesses will have no more than 3 minutes to speak. First, we will call the witnesses who are here in person to speak in panels of 4. When I call your name, please come to the table at the front and sit in the order you were called from your right to your left. Please press the button on your microphone before speaking to turn on your mic. The red light indicates that your mic is on. After a panel is done providing testimony, I and other council members may ask questions before calling the next panel. I will now call our first panel of in-person witnesses. David Sobelson, Commissioner ANC 6B. Eric Sheptock, Public Witness. Robert Oliver, Federation of Friends of the DC Public Library. Thank you very much. And Christina Hansen, Executive Director, CARE DC, Anacostia chapter. Yes. Thank you very much. All right, with that, Mr. Sobelson, if you want to kick us off.
Thank you, Chair Fruman, staff, neighbors, and friends. I'm David Sobelson, Advisory Neighborhood Commissioner for ANC 6B03. I chair ANC 6B's Southeast Library Task Force. On April 8th, our ANC voted unanimously to authorize me to represent the ANC at this hearing. I have provided you with a hard copy of my testimony and will also send it to staff by email. On this side of the Anacostia, and except for Navy Yard, our ANC includes everything east of South Capitol Street and south of East Capitol Street. Our Ward 6 ANC has only one public library, the Southeast Branch. It's also the closest library for many in Wards 7 and 8, especially the Navy Yard. In January 2024, the Southeast Library closed for renovations. Renovations are supposed to end next January, but DCPL Director Richard Reyes-Gavilan tells us that even if renovations finish on time, our neighborhood library might not reopen until the end of the second quarter, which is July 2026, 6 months later. When I expressed concern about that, he called that July date aspirational. This committee should ask how long it will take after renovations before DCPL opens the new library. 6 months is 1/4 of the amount of time estimated for the renovations themselves. Even if renovations finish in January, and even if the new library opens less than 6 months later, we will have lost our branch library for over 2 years. DC library guidelines promise that the DC library system will provide an interim facility when a library is closed for longer than 1 year. But DCPL resisted providing an interim facility. Thanks to our Ward 6 council member, just before the Southeast Branch closed, council appropriated funds for an interim library at the Arthur Capper Community Center. It's a lot closer for my ANC constituents than any other library. Those who know about the interim library have found its computers and printer an important resource. We also appreciate that after initially refusing to let us pick up and return books there, DCPL relented and installed an outdoor 24-hour book drop and arranged for us to pick up materials on hold. Finally, we warmly welcome the monthly renovation updates we get from general contractor Whiting Turner's Terry Bosnick and DCPL's Director of Capital Planning, Jaspreet Pawar. But DCPL still falls short. First and most important, DCPL refuses to open the interim library more than one evening per week or at all on weekends, even though the community center itself is open then. This committee should ask DCPL, when do DC residents use libraries? And what would it cost to open the facility 1 or 2 Saturdays per month? If necessary, we suggest closing the facility for a half day on a designated weekday, so kids who go to school and parents who work can use it for a few hours on Saturday. Right now, the interim library schedule makes it unavailable for working parents or school children. It also concerns us that we have no assurance DCPL will keep the Arthur Capper Interim Library open until the branch library reopens, whenever that is. This committee should insist that DCPL clarify how long Arthur Capper will stay open after renovations finish on the Southeast Branch. Our community doesn't want entirely to lose library access for the whole first half of 2026. Another problem will recur soon. It's starting to get hot outside. Last summer, usually at the last minute and with scant notice, DCPL closed its Capper facility almost every week. It left our residents in limbo, never knowing if they could count on getting into the Capper library. DCPL blamed a faulty HVAC system, a problem apparently isolated to the library rooms. HVAC issues never closed the community center. In fact, Arthur Capper is an official DC cooling center. Blaming the heat, DCPL has already closed the interim library 3 days this spring. What will happen when it gets really hot? Why can't DCPL use some of the money council appropriated to provide its staff with portable air conditioners or at least fans? Portable air
Mr.
conditioners.
Silverson, you're almost 50% over. Can I have your written testimony? Can I ask you to wrap it up?
Yes, of course. DCPL needs to do a better job at promoting the interim library. To quote a resident from our first community meeting, you can't just close our library and tell us to go downtown or to Northeast. We use the library here and we still need services here. You are just coming in here making decisions without considering us and our needs. That's still happening. It has to stop. This committee can make it stop. I would be happy to answer the committee's questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sobelson. Mr. Sheptuck?
Hello, Councilman Fruman. My name is Eric Jonathan Sheptuck. I've advocated for DC's homeless community since June 2006. We know that homeless people across the nation and around the world frequent their public libraries. We're quite the studious lot of people. So homeless people's problems become library problems and vice versa. DC's library system worked hard over the years to accommodate the homeless community. I was one of several homeless advocates who worked with the late Pam Stovall, as well as Rebecca Renard, to improve the experiences of homeless library patrons. As a matter of fact, it was the closing of the 930 Club, a 400-person, 6-day-per-week homeless drop-in center in the old brick red building of First Congregational United Church of Christ before the renovation, or the rebuilding, I should say, next to MLK Library. That led to us engaging with Pam Stovall. Even the current library director, Richard Reyes Gavilan, knows me by name. Currently, the library has a division called We Care, which, among other things, has a coffee and conversation hour every other Wednesday at MOK on the first floor. Okay, but anyway, they use that time to inform the attendees, generally homeless people, about upcoming DC council hearings on 4/30/25, the 80th anniversary of Hitler's death before he came back as Donald Trump. We Care personnel, after hearing me talk about the need for porta potties for the homeless who sleep in front of the library they can use at night, told us that they have throne access cards. The thrones are those blue and white bathrooms you see dotting the city. Even after the MLK Library serves, even after hours, the library serves the homeless community. The large overhang, which I'm glad wasn't enclosed during the 2017 and 2020 renovation, offers people a place to get out of the rain. The all-night lighting offers a safe space to sleep at night. Don't change that. All you do is shift the problem, not solve it. It would be a great idea to place a throne or as many as 4 porta potties to the far left of the MLK Library's G Street side, after having the hazmat crews clean up all the number 1 and number 2 off of the ground. People do what they have to do to survive. So don't hold it against them. Just help them. One way in which the DC government can help rather than harass them is by having case management, DBH, and others to meet them where they're at by working split shifts once every week or two. That is to say that these service providers could show up during the biweekly coffee and conversation sessions, staying until 2 p.m. and then come back at 9:30 at night to see who they can sign up for housing, basically. That said, I want to point out that homeless people get up every morning, move their belongings from under the MLK overhang, and library personnel hose the area down, almost like what happens during an encampment clearing, only without the draconian measures of throwing out what little bit they have left in the world. And so I hope the city officials put more effort into housing people and less into scattering homeless people to the 4 winds, where case managers and other service providers lose contact with people who were very close to getting housing in some cases. And I'll sum it up by saying this, that I have a homeless lady friend who was in a wheelchair, who has 6 different health issues, and she went to a shelter where they wouldn't let her in early when it was raining, and that power chair got ruined in the rain. And I was able to get another chair for her because the guy at my church who lost both legs and 1 arm in a work accident, he gave me information to where to get a secondhand chair. But anyway, when I got that chair for her, I brought her down to the library, and a woman named India that works in the cafe took about 10 minutes to tell Miss Kiki, my friend, who's legally blind, everything on the menu, and basically help her, and that kind of points out, or I want to point out that you might want to have some kind of kiosk that people can use when they're legally blind, to see what's on the menu. But anyway, that said, the library does a lot of good things for the homeless and for others, and you have in-house social services or social workers actually, and that's a very good thing. And so I want for you to keep that and fund it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sheptak. Mr. Oliver.
Yes, my name is Robert Oliver, and I'm the president of the Federation of Friends of the District Public Library. I just want to say also thank you for listening to us and hearing what we have to say. To quote Charles Dickens, "It was the best of times, it was the worst of times." This is the best way to describe DCPL's proposed fiscal year 26 budget. Our city finds itself in a new economic climate through no fault of its own. However, we must react. The fiscal year 26 proposed operating budget only represents a 1.9% decrease from the prior year. This is heartening since the uncertainty raised by federal actions forecasted a more dire outcome. In addition, funds for 6 security personnel have been provided. This increase has been a long-sought goal for which the community is grateful. Also, current staffing level is stable and no reductions in force are planned. This is also good since overall staffing is insufficient at current levels. 2 issues represent the worst of times. The first, the book collection budget has been cut. The primary role of any library is to provide current information to the public, and the library provides information electronically and in written form to meet a variety of tastes. The reduction of the collection budget cuts at the core of the library's primary mission, a provider of information for all. So I ask that the budget be restored to its formal level. I realize that this is a large request during these trying times, but I hope that council can respond to this challenge. Second, library operating hours could be cut. This move is to right-size the current staff levels with daily operating activities, so there will be less hours for important community meetings such as homeowner associations, civic associations, advisory neighborhood commission, and other meetings. There could be less time for children and teen enrichment if library hours are aligned closer to a 9 to 5 workday. Also, attendance can suffer if parents have less time to visit a library after arriving home from work. The staff shortage will become more acute as library branches under construction open for business. So, what can be done? Through the actions of this committee, we can make the worst of times into the best of times as much as possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Oliver. Ms. Hanson?
Good morning, Councilmember Fruman. My name is Christina Hansen, and I serve as the Executive Director of CARE DC, the Anacostia chapter. We work alongside 5 public schools in Ward 8 to support students, families, and educators in building strong, thriving learning communities. I'm here today to speak in deep appreciation of the incredible services offered by DC Public Libraries. DCPL is not just a place to borrow books, it's one of the most accessible and beloved institutions in our city. From workforce development resources and digital access to dynamic youth programming, DCPL is an essential partner in educational equity. One of the lesser known yet powerful tools DCPL offers is free on-demand tutoring for youth through its partnership with BrainFuse. While this may not fall under the formal structure of OSSI's high-impact tutoring, it is tutoring, and it is available right now to any student with a library card. In a city where families are hungry for academic support, especially in under-resourced communities, this is exactly the kind of resource that should be elevated, coordinated, and expanded. Which brings me to my call to action. If we are truly facing a budget crisis, we can no longer afford to operate in silos. I'm urging DCPL, OSSI, DCPS, and DC Public Charter School leaders to come together to audit and align where services are overlapping, underutilized, or duplicative. There is a real potential for cross-agency collaboration that centers on family access and transparency. And to the council, I urge you to require a deeper analysis of where existing resources are already at work across our education and library systems. Double dipping may be happening not out of malice, but out of misalignment. Let's be intentional about how we spend, streamline, and scale what's working. DCPL is doing its part, and now it's time for our education agencies to meet them at the table, not just to coordinate services, but to co-design a system that prioritizes students and families over bureaucratic turf. Thank you for your time and for continuing to champion equity and accountability in every corner of our public institutions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hanson. Just a few questions. Mr. Sobelson, I take it one set of questions you want to make sure that I'm asking is about the opening of the Southeast Library. And I think that there's actually some reasons to be concerned in this budget about the plans for the opening of the Southeast Library. And I promise you, I will ask the director about that subject. I take it the other piece is you want to make sure that the baton is passed so that the Arthur Capper facility stays open until the Southeast Library comes online. Is that fair?
Absolutely, absolutely. We want to be able to have library access throughout, and we do not understand why it should take months between the end of the renovations and the reopening, or that the Arthur Capper would be closed during that time. Doesn't make sense to us.
All right, well, I will ask about those things. I do think the plans for the Southeast Library as they're reflected in this budget are a thing that we're concerned about and will be priority to try to see if we can address. Mr. Sheptak, always great to see you. Thank you very much for your testimony. I mean, thank you for all the positive things that you have to say about what the libraries are doing in this space. It is a challenging space for the libraries, but I think that they have risen up to it well. That's how I'm hearing you describe it.
Yes, and I should point out too, though, that tomorrow is like a 5.5 hour long event at the library from 10 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. And it'll address the issue of homelessness and mental illness in the library. And we're going to have a bunch of big wigs there. Dr. Catherine Crossland, who heads Unity and that kind of thing. And I do like the fact that the council, I guess the chairman, has admitted that libraries are a social service because it got put onto the Human Services Committee, and thus this hearing.
I think a number of folks have speculated that might be why this assignment was done. I'm not sure that that is the case, but the reality is a lot of social services are being delivered at the libraries. So my hearings with the libraries are not so radically different from my hearings with DHS. But thank you again for your testimony. Mr. Oliver, you went straight to a couple of things that are, that jump off the page to us when we look at this budget. The cut to the collections budget is, that's important that we do what we can to remedy that. And the idea that we could lose hours at the library should be deeply troubling to everyone in the city. I mean, in a certain sense, there are, it's like a cliche. First, you close the libraries, and the idea is you close the libraries because that's a thing folks will turn around and remedy. It is, as you observed, a really difficult budget season, so nobody can make any promises, but I can assure you that just this panel, the Southeast Library, the collections budget, the hours, those are things that are very much top of our list. If we could do something, we would want to do something. So thank you for your testimony.
Well, let me add one more thing before we move on. I would also like to suggest that, as the gentleman said here, that the libraries has been added to the social services category, which there may be some relationship. But if such a thing is the wave of the future, we should also get more support from the social service agencies, especially in terms of having volunteers come in and doing actual social work to help with the communities that are there.
Fair enough. Thank you very much. Ms. Hanson, I won't hold you for long. I am intrigued by your suggestion. And I guess I'm curious how you see this working, because a focus for me is out of school time.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing is the science of learning.
Mm-hmm.
And that I had not thought about in a certain way, have thought about it, but I think you're suggesting some kind of more formal coordination on this. What does that look like to you?
That's a great question. If I had an answer to that, I would have brought it to you today. But I know that you are a champion around education, and in my mind, I'm starting to form these thoughts around there should be more intentional alignment. I stepped away from DC Public Schools after 15 years to run Care Anacostia as a community educator and advocate. And so in this past year, I've really seen and lived and breathed firsthand how robust DC Public Libraries are and how they serve our community. And so I am in this beginning phase of are the left and right hand talking? Are DC Public Libraries and OSSI talking about all these robust resources that are available, and how can we can be more intentional about making sure we're not doing the same things and wasting money in a way if these services already exist?
All right, well, thank you very much for that. This is a thing that I think I'm going to raise with the Deputy Mayor for Education, who has oversight over lots of the key players here. So thank you for your testimony. As it happens on Sunday, I was at MLK with my grandchildren, saw the kids in the children's reading room, and it's just a beautiful sight. So thank you all for your testimony.
Thank you so much.
And we will move to our next panel. Rebecca Lemos Otero, Santa Lopez, Jasper Collier, David Gillette, Yona Bromberg-Gaber. I think Mr. is Gillette. I think if you move over one. There you go. There you go. Thank you very much. All right, wonderful. Thank you very much. All right. Ms. Lemos Otero, good to see you.
Oh, hello. Perfect. Good morning, Councilmember Fruman, committee members and staff. My name is Rebecca Lemos Otero, and I want to thank you for the opportunity to testify today in strong support of the DC Public Library, especially the People's Archive, Dig DC, and the DC Oral History Collaborative, a partnership between Humanities DC and DCPL, that which I am proud to be the Executive Director of Humanities DC. The DC Public Library is one of our city's most trusted and accessible institutions. Through resources like the People's Archive and Dig DC and programs like the DC Oral History Collaborative, it ensures that the stories of everyday Washingtonians are recorded, preserved, and shared with the public. Since its inception, the collaborative has trained residents to collect and preserve over 700 oral histories from their communities. And in just the last year, and a half, more than 1,200 people have participated in programming, including workshops, meetups, and free public events. The stories produced through this work capture essential histories of housing justice, neighborhood change, music, activism, migration, and identity. In 2025, we expanded our efforts and are starting to offer aspects of programming in Spanish and designed specifically for the DC Latina community. This addition has allowed us to build new trust and engagement in communities that have long been underrepresented in archival work, and we hope to expand these efforts to other identities in the city. It reflects our shared belief that everyone in DC deserves to see themselves and hear themselves reflected in our city's historical records. One of the most memorable moments of the year was Beyond the Archives, a public event held at the MLK Library. The evening featured a powerful performance by a Latina drag artist, blending oral histories, cultural storytelling, and celebrating the LGBTQ+ and immigrant histories. It was a striking reminder that oral history is not just documentation. its living culture, and it belongs in our public spaces. In a moment when federal funding for cultural work is being severely cut, and there are plans to remove supportive agencies, institutions like DCPL are critical for our local residents. Their leadership in public archiving and historical access ensures that stories aren't just preserved, but activated and used to connect residents across generations, backgrounds, and wards. This work is deeply public, multilingual, and community-centered, and it could not happen without the talented, mission-driven staff of DCPL and the support of this council. I close to thanking you for your continued investment in DCPL and by urging ongoing support for the People's Archive, Dig DC, and DC Oral History Collaborative. These programs don't just tell the story of our city, they make space for all of us to be part of it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Colley?
All right. Thank you, Councilmember Furman and the rest of the council for this opportunity to share with you the public benefits and impact of the DC Oral History Collaborative, the partnership program of the DC Public Library and Humanities DC. My name is Jasper Collier, and I've managed the program since its creation 9 years ago. The collaborative began when the DC Council, recognizing the importance of documenting and sharing stories in a rapidly changing city, allocated funds for its establishment to the DC Public Library. As of 2025, the district-wide Oral History Project has collected over 700 oral history interviews with Washingtonians in every ward of the city and contributed these recordings to the People's Archive at the DC Public Library. Over half of these interviews are available online and more are being added every year. Thanks to the programmatic funds contributed to the collaborative by the DC Public Library, these archived oral histories are readily available to local scholars, academic historians, and community members. The library's continued support of the DC Oral History Collaborative also allows for the creation of story booths, exhibits, listening events, panel conversations, teacher seminars, and more. The library's programming and exhibition staff have used oral history interviews to interpret the city's history for public audiences. This can be seen in their exhibits on DC's go-go and punk music histories. The DC Oral History Collaborative's continued success will rely on the library's ability to continue to support it, not just with the programmatic funding it provides, but with the thoughtful guidance of its staff, the beautiful event and meeting spaces enjoyed by collaborative participants, and the confidence it provides community oral historians and narrators who know their stories will be well preserved within its archives. I always like to call attention to the fact that the project stands alone as a publicly supported citywide oral history project that trains and equips members of the public to record oral histories with their communities and provides an accessible place for their long-term preservation. The District of Columbia government's constant ability to look for new ways to nurture participatory democracy, encourage civic participation, and strive to ensure that people are heard and seen are a large part of what makes the city great. The library itself is an important site of cultural creativity, exchanges of ideas, and public learning. The DC Public Library has been an exemplary program partner and a true collaborator on programming, strategy, and communication. Trainings and programs have been held in library branches across the city. The conference space at the Martin Luther King Jr. Library has been invaluable as its downtown location is accessible to participants from across the city. The new DC Oral History Collaborative cohort completed their training last month. 13 new projects launched and bound for the People's Archive at DCPL. One project will interview DC residents who have been part of the city's foster care program. Another will explore the history of a local nonprofit that provides support to the unhoused. One project will examine the history of the 1966 Free DC movement and other collective actions aimed at increased autonomy for DC. Support for the DC Public Library means support for these residents turned project directors and others who document, preserve, share, honor, and respect the city's unheard voices. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Gillette?
Good morning, committee members. Thank you for having me. I am David Gillette, Secretary Treasurer for AFSCME Local 1808 and a 13-year library associate in the District of Columbia Public Library System. I provide direct library services to the public, sitting on desks, helping people find books, guiding patrons to computers and relevant programs, sometimes running those programs. I very much appreciate that the city is facing a difficult fiscal situation. That being said, I want to emphasize that the public library underpins our local economy in ways that may not be obvious. When we reopened during lockdown, my colleagues and I were startled by how many receipts and return slips we found ourselves printing at no cost for patrons. and how many other types of service we started to provide, as when the library suddenly became a major node for the distribution of COVID tests. Since the pandemic, our services have expanded with no corresponding increase in pay. Library users search for jobs and work on resumes every day. Our agency provides an in-kind subsidy for a wide variety of businesses and agencies in the district, all without most employers and landlords being particularly aware of what we're doing and how they benefit. Removing the influx of public money could stifle growth in unpredictable ways. In particular, I would caution you against making existing issues worse. Staffing is an ongoing sore spot. Library workers, like the members of Local 1808, feel this in a very immediate way. 6 hours on a circulation desk on Saturday is very hard work. But it redounds to hurt the services we provide the public. If the lines to check out books are long, if holds take a long time to make it to the shelves, then patrons will be waiting to have questions answered at the computers, and maybe they won't make a deadline to submit a rental or job application. Next time, they might not even try. If one can't get in and out in half an hour on a lunch break, our utility is diminished. Our current staffing model allows us to operate with as few as 2 workers at a location during an 8-hour shift. This can be done, but it has immediate negative effects on quality of service and the safety of the location. I would suggest, along with others testifying here today, that we raise the required number of staff per worksite to 5. City would have to commit to hiring more FTEs to make this possible. I am confident it would improve library services, and I suspect it would have a bit of a counter-cyclical effect for the area, especially if we are entering a recession. Thank you. The rest of my time's good.
Thank you. Yona? If you could turn your microphone on.
Thank you, Councilmember Fruman. I'm Yona Bromberg-Gaber. I'm here as president of Ask Me Local 1808, representing most of DC Public Library's workers. I work as a digital navigator, providing tech assistance to library customers in Mount Pleasant and at MLK Library. It might be an accident of circumstance that the Human Services Committee now oversees the library, but it recognizes how our work has changed. As information workers based in neighborhood institutions, DC Public Library workers are expected to be first responders and urgent providers for human services, following trauma-informed care principles. Yet we are not compensated as human service workers, nor are we staffed to do that work sustainably. And the mayor's budget proposes cutting library staff further. During a recession, emergency rooms see an increase in need and provide essential stopgaps, even though they aren't properly equipped to provide long-term sustainable care, because it's the only service in town that doesn't require appointments or membership to get in. For human services, the library serves that same essential stopgap measure, despite our very severe limitations. Last resort services provided by library workers include trauma-informed de-escalation, as well as helping people navigate applications, apply to jobs, improve their skills, and connect with community resources. We also enable libraries to be meeting places for community organizing and for providers to meet with the public. This is a marked change to libraries that our budget has not kept up with, leaving the agency without the resources and the workers without appropriate compensation to actually meet these emergency human service needs, particularly during a recession. This budget proposal does not enable the library to meet the increasing need. Instead, our administration is already cutting for significant service cuts in order to maintain basic operations. In the last year, neighborhood libraries frequently closed early or opened late because of staffing shortages. Staff members are burnt out from managing crises without having backup, straining our existing staffing model. We have a massive backlog of materials that haven't been processed due to our understaffing. Some of this was ameliorated by having several branches closed for renovations and repairs, but during FY26, with the reopening of Southeast Library, we will have every branch open and need every staff member. Residents want more library buildings open, but we do not have the staff for the buildings that we already have. This budget proposal does not fund the requested enhancement to staff up for the Southeast reopening, which will need even more staff than before because of the expanded footprint. It also cuts 25 vacancies that we desperately need filled. While we work as a union with the library administration to establish newly sustainable staffing models, We know with certainty that without at least 10 to 15 additional FTEs to neighborhood library services, the library will see severe system-wide service cuts. We encourage the council to add funding for those FTEs to ensure that we can retain as many library hours as possible, understanding that at this point, some cuts are necessary without a massive addition of staff. We do also seek enhancements to the General Improvements Capital Fund to implement long-needed ADA fixes. Several branches throughout the system have had broken doors and frequently failing elevators, which has rendered many of our buildings inaccessible to some of our most vulnerable neighbors. The library's current plan has some of those fixes implemented in 2028. We recommend front-loading the budget so that more fixes are done sooner in this next fiscal year so we can actually catch up with the need. And I also want to spend a brief moment discussing the proposed changes to paid family leave and medical leave for DC government workers. Private sector workers in DC get 12 weeks. Reducing that same leave entitlement for DC government workers from 8 weeks to 2 weeks is a recipe for disaster that will result in attrition. A public worker who has a grandparent to care for is directly incentivized to join the private sector, just to preserve some semblance of stability in their lives. By reducing this benefit, not only will there not be overtime savings, but there will be further attrition and turnover, ultimately costing DC government more than it saves. DC government labor is extraordinarily devalued by expecting our employees and their families to need less support than our private sector peers. I've submitted additional written testimony with details regarding our enhancement requests, and I'm available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just a few questions. Ms. Lemos Otero, it's a little off topic, but there's a lot happening on the federal level that is affecting the humanities, and I'm curious to what extent anything happening on the federal level has cascaded down and had an impact on you at this point.
Sure. So as of early April, there was significant cuts to NEH and pretty much working towards the elimination of NEH as an agency altogether. That is affecting all the humanities councils, including Humanities DC, which is the Humanities Council for the Washington area. That is a large part of our budget, about half of our operating fund that was surprisingly taken away this year, and we are working to not be dependent on or expect next year. And so we are definitely looking at local funding and local support from our local government to help us figure out how to be able to continue the humanities work that has been so vital to our cultural work in the city.
And is that a cut that happened in this fiscal year, dollars that you expected this year that you're not getting?
Yes.
Okay. All right. And both you and Mr. Collier talked about the oral history work, which is very exciting. I'm curious, to what extent is that fitting into plans for DC 250, or are there suggestions for how that oral history work might fit with DC 250?
Sure. We're still in the early planning stages of planning, but our hope is that we can incorporate oral history into the 250 programming that we do. I'm sitting on the DC 250 Commission right now and have definitely proposed some ideas that are about collecting oral histories of how Washingtonians feel in this moment, being Washingtonians in this city, considering, what is going on, but also just our traditions and our culture. I would like to use oral history as a tool to collect all that and make sure that it sits in our public library so that people can access it in the future, but then also pull that out for some public programming, installations, what have you, so that we really see ourselves reflected in this acknowledgement of the 250.
Wonderful. I will say, I love the oral history work that you've done in the partnership with the libraries and doing that work. Again, I was just happened to be there this weekend, and the way in which the libraries are used to promote that kind of work is really important. And thank you for coming out to testify about it. Mr. Gillette and Yona, I hear you. And some of it, you have the idea of increased staffing off of where we were. And, I'm not saying that's not a good idea. I just am want to say I don't think it's an unlikely idea in this environment. But we definitely understand the strain that library workers are under, given the broadened role. And I think it's cold comfort to say that's a thing that we need to be focused on over the horizon, but it does feel like a thing that isn't, we're going to do the best we can in this environment, but it's not a building year, it's a preserving year, I think, if we can do that. I had not been aware of the ADA issues, so thank you for raising that, and had not focused on the proposed changes to the paid family leave and what that means for morale, particularly morale in an agency that is currently feeling pretty stretched. So thank you for that testimony. Thank you very much for all that you do. And I think I'm going to turn to our next panel, if that's okay. All right, we are in the place on the list where we pivot to virtual, but is there anyone else here? Oh, wonderful. Okay, come on forward. Please do. And anybody else here who had hoped to testify in person who hasn't had a chance to testify yet? Okay. And forgive me if you say your name as you start your testimony.
Hello, my name is Meredith Holmgren. I'm the president of Rosedale Library Friends. Our branch, Rosedale Library in Northeast DC, is a real centerpiece of the Rosedale community. Although Rosedale is a relatively small branch, it packs a mighty punch, welcoming nearly 70,000 visitors per year, making it among the most densely used branches in the system when accounting for square footage. We are proud members of Ward 7, which has fantastic neighborhood engagement, but does struggle in many areas of social and economic welfare. Ward 7 has a child poverty rate of around 30%, which is roughly twice the national average. Ward 7 has among the lowest rate of functional literacy in DC, meaning that residents struggle with everyday tasks like interpreting job announcements and reading maps. It also has among the lowest rates of internet accessibility. So any and all resources like the DC Public Library to help residents improve their life skills, knowledge resources, and economic status are absolutely critical to communities like ours. The proposed budget, which would force the DC Public Library to cut hours and days of operation, will be devastating to the Rosedale community. We depend on the library to be open for public programs, literacy and reading, job search training, technical training, and early childhood learning. The library provides critical support to parents and families, renters, and homeowners. Rosedale is also a place that has benefited from DC's Oral History Collaborative. We have had at least 6 people in our community go through oral history training to learn professional standards in gathering life stories of our residents. The oral history program gives a lot of bang for the bucks of DC taxpayers, and I think it's irresponsible to cut the oral history budget, a meager $200,000, considering the priceless histories that we gather as a result of this program. However, there is some good news for Rosedale in the budget. We are very grateful for the increase in capital expenditure that will go toward designing a new full-service library to serve our community. From 2016 to 2019, Rosedale Library Friends successfully advocated to include Rosedale in DCPL's master plan for library renovations. And to DCPL's credit, they have really come through for us in sticking to that plan and making progress towards the renovation timeline. DCPL executive staff have visited the community on several occasions, made presentations about the process, and have been responsive to community input. We're very grateful for their ongoing support and efforts to improve facilities and services at the Rosedale branch. So I will end on that positive note, but summarizing my testimony, I will just say, DC public libraries are needed now more than ever, especially in underserved communities like Rosedale. Please help us claw back the budget to maintain services. Please keep the Oral History Collaborative funded. And I again want to express our gratitude to DCPL staff and leadership who are working to do right by Rosedale in improving our capital budget and making progress towards future facilities renovations. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony. And sir?
My name is Claude Elliott. I'm a resident of Ward 8. I have lived in more than 9 cities, and based on my personal experiences, Washington, D.C. has the best library system. However, what are buildings without staff and the state of our technology? I strongly support sustained funding for the library. It is essential to the quality of life of our city and our diverse neighborhoods. I have experienced in many ways the library welcomes people of all interests, backgrounds, and aspirations. I cannot think of any other DC institution where children, youth, adults, and my senior community can learn, meet, and be inspired without pay. The availability of free computer classes in Excel and PowerPoint at the beginning and advanced levels provided critical skills for me as Deputy Director of STEP Africa and grants writer for the Essential Theater. Another resource is the availability to reserve rooms for monthly meetings for Black artists of DC and check-ins with UDC interns. Have borrowed books, attended films, exhibitions, and programs at 5 community branches. My introduction to oral history began in 2017 via DC Oral History Collaborative. Due to his training, technical assistance, and grant supports, I have been afforded an opportunity to give back to the community through my oral history project, creating space and opportunities, DC Black-owned managed art galleries and spaces. If not for conversation with artists in their 30s and 40s, I would not be aware that more than 20 Black-owned managed art galleries and spaces existed in DC between the 1970s and 1990s. My oral history project introduces the broader community to a thriving Black artist community and the historic presence of Black-owned managed galleries and art spaces. The funding that the Public Library provides to the DC Oral History Collaborative provides training, technical support, and grants. I would not be here today, and I remain concerned for the aging artists awaiting anticipation that their oral history will be recorded. And I just wanted to share a couple ways that my project has increased the visibility and community support for Black artists. In 2023, Percy Martin, who is one of the narrators, had his first solo exhibition. He's in his 70s. And in 2024, I was the oral historian for the printmaking project film, Washington, D.C. Black Printmakers, Percy Martin and Michael B. Platt, and 4 of my narrators were also featured in that film. In 2024, Humanity DC sponsored a community conversation at the Martin Luther King Public Library, where there were 3 of the narrators who were able to talk about their lives and their journey. And at the same time, we had 3 portrait artists painting their portraits. So it was the first experience that many people have actually been able to witness artists create in the creative process. And last month, I presented another 3 of my narrators in conversation with the community at Best Boys and Poets. In closing, I want the record to reflect the outstanding work of Humanities DC staff and its commitment to document and preserve stories of the unrepresented voices of DC residents. The quality of my work is enhanced through year-round technical workshops, networking opportunities with other grantees, meetups, and community resources. So Councilman Furman and members of the Human Services Committee, I urge you to ensure that funding continues for the DC Public Library and the DC Oral History Collaborative.
All right, thank you very much to both of you for your testimony. We're going to turn now to our virtual witnesses, and when I call your name, you should be elevated to be a panelist, and then when it's time for you to testify, please turn on your camera and your microphone. I think I'll call the full list. 'Cause we don't have a room at the table issue, but Zachary Israel, Trupti Patel, Mark Pattison, Mark Friend, Doris Bishop, Randy Speck, Leslie Arun Walsh, Merrick Smith, and Scott Goldstein. And if others join, we'll elevate them once they arrive. But starting with Mr. Israel.
Yes, thank you, Chairman Fruman and members of the Committee on Human Services. Thank you for holding this hearing today. I'm a resident of Ward 4 and previously served as an ANC commissioner on ANC 4D back in 2021 and 2022. This is the 7th time I have testified before the DC Council over the past 4 years on the issue of a new library on Kennedy Street Northwest. In the intervening 5+ years since DCPL's original 10-year facilities master plan was published in November 2020, myself, Ward 4 Councilmember Janice Lewis George, ANC 4D, and other members of the Brightwood Park neighborhood in Ward 4 have repeatedly testified in support of a new full-service public library to be located on the Kennedy Street Northwest corridor in Ward 4. The original facilities master plan identified our neighborhood as being one of only 6 geographic areas throughout the district where residents, quote, do not have the same level of service as in other areas, end quote. This is still the reality in 2025. Over the past 2 consecutive fiscal years, the DC Council included capital funds to DCPL for site acquisition of a new library on Kennedy Street Northwest, $5 million in FY24 and $2 million in FY25. In both instances, DCPL chose not to utilize any of those funds when they had the opportunity to do so. Indeed, DCPL's FY25 supplemental capital budget before you now eliminates the entirety of the $2 million associated with an idea for a project in Brightwood Park. This is a slap in the face to Brightwood Park and continued evidence that DCPL leadership is not serious about ever bringing a new library to a neighborhood that needs it. DCPL's update to its facilities master plan, publicly unveiled on February 26, 2025, includes a, quote, key recommendation, end quote, explicitly calling for, quote, piloting a community commons in the Brightwood Park Manor Park area as an innovative idea for a new service model. The facilities master plan update states that a multi-purpose community commons public space would include core services, including the most popular offerings of DC's new public libraries, including a large flexible meeting program room for ANCs, small group study rooms, a laptop kiosk for in-house computer use, open seating area, free printing, and the ability for residents to pick up books placed on hold that are delivered from libraries throughout the system. It's a great idea. And then DCPL's pre-hearing responses at February's performance oversight hearing indicated that, quote, additional funding from the mayor and city council is required to design, construct, and operate a community commons. And yet, DCPL's submitted budget for FY26 includes no funding at all for this in Brightwood Park. Ward 4 residents who live in our neighborhood in Brightwood Park continue to deserve a library facility that they can easily walk to and utilize. It is not acceptable that DCPL leadership continues to disrespect our part of the district, and I urge this committee to allocate funding in the FY26 budget for a DCPL community commons facility in Brightwood Park. I made a commitment several years ago to continue testifying on this issue until Brightwood Park actually gets a library. I will continue to do so no matter how many more years it takes to get over the finish line. Thank you, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Israel. Trupti Patel.
Good afternoon, Chairperson Fruman. Thank you for hosting this hearing so that my comments may be entered into the record. My name is Tripti Patel, and I'm currently a fourth term advisory neighborhood commissioner that represents single member District 2A03, which is the historic Foggy Bottom. I'm also currently the chairperson of ANC 2A. And the reason why I'm here to testify today, as I testified in your performance oversight hearing a few months ago, it did get me a lot of traction. I had the staff at the West End Library reach out to me saying that they definitely want ANC2A to continue to have their meetings there and what could we do. And while I very, very much appreciate the staff at the West End Library, I want to make it very clear that my frustration was not with the West End Library staff. It was with the DC Public Library system. And I want to make it very clear that that libraries are an important community asset and resource. And I know that this is a tight budget year, but access to libraries and the need for libraries should be something be considered as a non-negotiable, and that we need to prioritize, because this is one of the few places that communities can gather in a place that is safe. It is where ANC2A would like to continue meeting, but with the reduction in hours, we can't ever have our meeting there. We can't do a meeting in 2 hours. The community likes to talk. And I also don't think it's fair, especially in a tight budget season, for ANC2A to use taxpaying money to pay, and rightfully so, a staffer to stay behind so that we can have our meeting. So that I would request that, if possible, and which I know it's hard to ask, that if the West End Library hours could be re-extended to pre-COVID hours, it would be greatly appreciated. And I'm going to go ahead and yield back the balance of my time back to the dais. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Patel. Mark Pattison.
Chair Fruman, thank you for providing this opportunity to testify. My name is Mark Pattison, and I'm president of the Friends of the Juanita E. Thornton Shepherd Park Library. The DC Public Library budget is an awful budget, probably one of many for fiscal 26. Library activists were warned last week that DCPL will likely cut not only hours, but days that neighborhood libraries are open. When you're shrinking branch library operational budgets by 7.5%, it's tough to see how a cut in hours can be avoided. Currently, branch libraries are open 61 hours per week. I'd like to see DCPL retain that 61-hour week, even if individual branches themselves can't stay open all 61 of those hours. Some within DCPL believe that having staggered hours at branches will only confuse patrons and further depress attendance. I say otherwise. We've got 25 branches. Pair them up. If one library can't be open mornings, the twinned library can. If one library can't be open Saturdays, the twinned library can. The one branch I would exempt from twinning is Mount Pleasant, the only public library in Ward 1, and the branch with by far the biggest usage. I would hate to see patrons have to make it all the way to the MLK library 2 days each week just for basic library services. Talk about depressing attendance. You could also get more creative with floaters under this twinning arrangement, since 24.5 positions will be permanently left unfilled under this budget. You can't float to another branch if they all adopt the same truncated hours. A point I raised in my testimony during this year's performance oversight hearings, which I'll raise again here. DCPL should institute a volunteer program for adults. In the sworn testimony during that hearing, DCPL Executive Director Richard Reyes-Gavilan said, and I quote, "We aren't really set up for that kind of thing." Well, tell me something I didn't know. He also cautioned about volunteers doing the work of unionized library workers. To that I reply, as a dues-paying union member since 1984, if teenagers can volunteer at the library without running afoul of union rules, then so can adults, especially during school hours. 2 years ago, the DC Council passed the Ward 4 Libraries Act, which committed $5 million to the building of a much-needed library on Kennedy Street Northwest, and which DCPL unsuccessfully lobbied against. The act was repealed last year in the mayor's budget, and the allotment shrunk to $2 million. Now, how many of those dollars were spent from either budget? 0. Now the Kennedy Street Library is nowhere to be seen in the FY26 budget. Why am I not surprised? And not only does the proposed FY 2025 supplemental capital budget eliminate that $2 million for a Kennedy Street Library, that's project code 101257, but the same budget allocates $2.8 million for an open air heated pool at Carter Barron. Really? The Ward 4 community wants the library, and this committee has heard testimony to that effect over the past 4 years, including today. Whoever came up with that pool scheme is no environmentalist. We want to open mines in our ward more than we want to open a winter pool. If you're going to find money for something lacking in the DCPL budget, give it to the Kennedy Street Library project. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pattison. For Mr. Pattison, Mr. Israel, and Ms. Patel, we don't have copies of your testimony. If you can make sure that you upload it, that would be helpful.
Will do,
I uploaded
Chairperson.
mine this morning.
Oh, okay, great.
Yeah, I just uploaded mine a few minutes ago, Chairman.
All right, should have.
I'll also upload mine. Sorry, Chairperson Fruman, been busy, but I got you.
All good, all good. Okay, Doris Bishop, Doris Bishop, I'm sorry, I've called everybody. Oh, Mark Friend, I got myself confused, apologies.
No worries, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Perfect. Hello, my name is Mark Friend. I am the ANC Commissioner for 7D06, the Rosedale community, which includes the Rosedale Library. I'm also an active member of the Rosedale Library Friends Group. I want to start by saying thank you to the DCPL team and leadership for robust and meaningful engagement on the new library. Our community desperately needs a full-scale library, and DCPL leadership has been a wonderful partner. Everyone I talked to is excited for this new library and appreciate the flexibility that DCPL has shown. We are grateful for the additional $1.05 million in funding for the Rosedale Library construction coming out of the capital budget in this year's budget. We continue to encourage the library to explore building up and out on the current site and encourage the DC Council to fund the construction in years to come. I will say that the community remains concerned about the decrease in hours and staff across DCPL. The Rosedale Library is a community hub, and as we work to reduce gun violence in our community, the library place is an essential safe space for our youth. I strongly encourage the council to work to find the funding to keep the library open and staffed properly till 7 p.m. Once again, thank you to the leadership of DCPL for going hand in hand with us, and thank you to the librarians who staff it every day. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Friend. I think Ms. Bishop, Mr. Speck, Leslie Arun Walsh, and Merrick Smith are not here, and so we will turn next to Scott Goldstein.
Good afternoon. I'm excited today, Chairman, to give probably my shortest testimony ever. Libraries are so integral to all of our communities, and we need them fully funded. As a Petworth resident, I'm grateful for the renovations about to take place at the Petworth Library. And as a former resident of the Kennedy Street corridor, I wish the mayor and council would invest in a library as an anchor to Kennedy Street as well. I also want to +1 the comments from Christina Hansen about coordinating OSSI and public library services, which is worth exploring. But I'm here as the leader of a small nonprofit with a smaller but important ask today. It's time for libraries to allow food again at all locations and ensure branches have evening hours every day. The pandemic policy to not allow food in meeting rooms prevents small, especially volunteer-based organizations from hosting meetings in the libraries and instead forces us to spend money on private venues, which often aren't as accessible to residents in every neighborhood. It's not fair to ask educators or any resident to come to evening meetings without providing food, and it's not fair to ask organizations to spend hundreds of dollars per meeting for private venues just because the library won't allow food. The director has said numerous times over several years they're in the process of revising this, but it's not happened. So as this is a budget hearing, if there's any cost associated with this, I ask the director to tell the committee what funds you would need to change this policy and to get it done so our libraries can be accessible spaces for local organizations to host evening meetings. This shouldn't be that hard to achieve. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Goldstein. I'm not sure, do we have your written testimony?
I just sent it about an hour ago.
Okay, and Mr. Friend, did we have yours? Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much to all of the witnesses who testified in this panel. I think, Mr. Israel, you are dogged. And so I hope you don't have to testify for too very long, but I hear you. Ms. Patel, look into the the hours at the West End Library. I served on an ANC, and gosh, our meetings often ran till 11 o'clock or later. So good for you if you can get them done much more quickly than that, but we'll look into it. Mr. Patterson, thank you for the suggestion. I hope we don't have to go to something where it's a kind of shuttle approach where one place is open at one time, another place is open at another. But thanks for putting that idea on the table, and I will ask about the food in the rooms, Mr. Goldstein, and we'll see where that goes. So thank you to all of you who testified, and Mr. Friend for your support for the Rosedale Library. Good to hear the testimony today on that subject. I'm going to turn now to our government witness, and so we will hear now from Executive Director Richard Reyes Gavilan. And if you could come join us at the table and bring whatever other staff who might be testifying to the table as well. Done. Yeah, one second. Great. All right. So for anyone who expects to testify or may be called on, I would invite all of the witnesses, government witnesses who may be testifying, to raise your right hand. And do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you are about to provide to the Committee on Human Services is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
I do.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Director Reyes Gavilan. If when you're ready, we can proceed with your testimony.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Councilmember Fruman and committee staff. I am Richard Reyes Gavilan, the Executive Director of DC Public Library. I am pleased to submit testimony this afternoon regarding Mayor Bowser's proposed fiscal year 2026 budget and Budget Support Act and fiscal year 2025 supplemental budget. I'd like to thank the committee and the entire DC Council for their deep interest in our work, evidenced by the robust participation at our most recent oversight hearing. I'd like to thank Mayor Bowser and her team for their work on the FY26 budget, which includes some important enhancements for the library, especially for public safety and also in the capital budget. Reductions in the operating budget were expected given the district's economic outlook, and I look forward to discussing the impact of those reductions with you today. Thanks to the Board of Library Trustees under the leadership of Chair Tony Williams for its oversight and guidance, and to the supporters and advocates of the library, including the Friends Groups of the DC Public Library and the DC Public Library Foundation. Lastly, I offer my thanks to the staff of the library who continue to work hard for district residents despite ongoing staffing shortages, threats of furloughs, and the general anxiety wrought by the seismic changes occurring throughout the country, but felt especially acutely here in Washington, D.C. We'll start with the FY26 to 31 and FY25 supplemental capital improvement plan. That's good news. DC Public Library capital projects. The capital improvement plan provides welcome and critical increases at varying levels to all of our fully funded projects, including Congress Heights, Chevy Chase, Deanwood, Edgewood, Eckington, Rosedale, and Shepherd Park. We're especially thankful for the $7 million increase in FY26 for Congress Heights, without which the project, which is already winning design awards, could be jeopardized. There are reductions in fleet replacement of $523,000 and IT modernization of $700,000 that we do not anticipate severely impacting operations in 2026 specifically. The FY25 supplemental capital budget provides a much appreciated enhancement of $1.3 million for the refresh of the Petworth Library, scheduled to begin later this year. It also eliminates the entirety of the $2 million associated with an idea for a project in Brightwood Park. Turning now to the FY26 budget and FY25 supplemental operating budget. The mayor's proposed FY26 operating budget represents a 2% decrease compared to the FY25 budget. We're thankful for receiving 6 FTE for additional public safety officers, significantly increasing our coverage across the library system. We also received continued funding for 2 mental health specialists that are hired with one-time funds in FY25. A $2 million proposed reduction in personnel services will prevent us from filling 24.5 vacant FTE that are mostly public service positions. At last year's budget hearing and this year's oversight hearing, I spoke at some length about the impacts that lost FTE and the inability to fill vacant ones we're having on a library system that is charged not only with library work, but also relied upon to play an increasingly critical role in the district's human services ecosystem as well. Delayed openings, a reduction in programming and services, and a strained staff working harder with less support have all contributed to a model that is unsustainable. To make matters worse, our new Southeast Library is scheduled to open in early 2026, requiring 4 additional staff members for a building that will be twice as big as the one that closed last year. We did not receive an operating enhancement for Southeast. If the $2 million is not restored, we will eliminate 2 days of service per week in the new fiscal year, likely operating on a Tuesday to Saturday schedule. Even if the $2 million is restored, the library will need to reduce hours of service across the neighborhood libraries, albeit not as drastically, to account for some of what I mentioned above. We will still be able to commit to 7 days of service per week, but with reduced hours on what have traditionally been our long days. In every budget scenario, we are committed to preserving existing hours of service at the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial Library, with more than 65,000 visits each month. The building serves residents from every ward in the district, and therefore we believe it should be prioritized. The proposed budget also reduces the personnel budget by $195,000 by eliminating step increases for eligible staff. The proposed budget reduces the library's collections budget by $1 million, a 20% reduction to our already low materials budget at a time when circulation of library materials, especially ebooks, is at an all-time high. This reduction will be exacerbated by the opening of the Southeast Library in 2026, one of our busiest circulating branches, which did not receive funding for an opening day collection. Furthermore, funding for the library's oral history project, $200,000, is eliminated. The FY25 supplemental budget further erodes the library's collections. It eliminates the entirety of our non-lapsing carryover collections budget of more than $2 million. That carryover budget has increased in the last 5 years for a number of reasons. The library received more than $1 million for the opening of MLK and spent only a portion of it because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Furthermore, COVID-related closures across the library system impacted our need to spend all of our budget. Lastly, in the past 2 years, carryover funds were targeted for mid-year elimination, and we therefore could not access those funds until late in the fiscal year, too late to spend. We're in that situation right now. The supplemental budget also eliminates the library's carryover funding amassed through revenue-generating activities. $1.8 million that the Board of Library Trustees earmarks for exhibitions, cultural programs, and related MLK Library building needs will be swept, severely limiting the events, exhibitions, and programs that we offer at the library. Coupled with the possible elimination of the Federal Institute of Museum and Library Services that has provided us more than $1 million annually for programs and services, we could be facing a scenario in which we are doing little but opening our doors every day. The supplemental eliminates the carryover funding from the library's Books from Birth program. The funding has accumulated as there has been a decrease in eligible participants in the district. Loss of the carryover funding will not prevent the library from signing up new members, but it will eliminate our ability to market the initiative and conduct related programs like the library's Sing, Talk, and Read Festival and the Books from Birth graduation events. Finally, the supplemental eliminates the $315,000 West End Library and Firehouse Maintenance Fund that is managed and administered by the Department of General Services. This will require the library to use more of its own limited maintenance funding on the branch. There are several proposed changes in the Budget Support Act related to the potential loss of the library's carryover funds and will impact the library's work. The BSA recommends converting several non-lapsing accounts into lapsing accounts, most critically, the library's collections account. Book buying does not have a start and end date each year. If our collections accounts reverts to a lapsing account, then we would need to stop buying books each spring so that everything purchased is on hand by the end of the fiscal year in September. The BSA also proposes an annual transfer of future funds in the next 4 fiscal years from both the library's revenue generating account and the West End maintenance account into the general fund. Contrary to the policy adopted by the Library Board of Trustees, $150,000 of the revenue generating fund would transfer to the general fund in every year from 2026 to 2029. A varying amount of the West End account would transfer every year, including $272,000 next fiscal year. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to provide today's testimony. I'm joined today by members of the library's executive management team and our agency fiscal officer, and we welcome any questions that the committee may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Interesting to hear. We had folks from the union talk about the strain on the workers, and then you acknowledge the same strain on the workers. We are in an environment where I think our aspiration is to tread water. And so I'm going to ask questions about what it would take to tread water. I want to jump in into the changes to DCPL's proposed FY26 staffing levels. There was a freezing of around 24.5 FTEs, almost 2 million that you talked about, that would otherwise be hired to serve across the district and neighborhood libraries in all 8 wards. I understand, and you testified that if we did that, that you would, that would lead to reductions in library hours from the current 77 days a week to 61 hours to just 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. Is that, would you still have, is that all vacancy savings? Is that the way that the mayor made these cuts, is by eliminating vacancies? And are there any vacancies that are left?
Well, technically, the vacancies have not been, the FTEs have not been eliminated, but the funding for the FTEs have been eliminated. Although we did, in the last fiscal years, in 24 and 25, where those vacancies were eliminated as well, correct? So we had 28.5 vacancies that were eliminated as part of the last 2 fiscal year budgets.
And then there still were 24.5 vacancies, and those are there, but there's not funding to fill them.
In the 26, that's correct.
And you talked about, you know, if we could find the $2 million to do that, you could get close to the current hours, but it didn't sound like you could get all the way to current hours. What would be lost, and what would it take in order to actually tread water on this question?
So by tread water, do you mean maintaining current hours?
Yeah.
Let me just echo a few of the things that our union leadership said a little bit earlier. We are really operating on an unsustainable model. Instances where we've got too few staff members that are responsible for opening or keeping a library open. It's making it so that we can't do the proper amount of programming that we'd like to do. It prevents us from doing the right outreach that we need to do. You also heard that, you know, for years, the library has been sort of playing the shell game where we have the good fortune of capital projects that allow us to have anywhere from 12 to 15 staff members, possibly in 2 locations that we can distribute across the library system because of construction projects. By the time the Southeast Library reopens in early 2026, we hope, we're not going to have the luxury of being able to distribute staff members any longer. And we've been doing that for years. Basically, we've been doing that since the very beginning of this kind of capital renaissance project that started for us back in 2009, 2010. And then there's also just the issue that in order to make our budget, we have to keep maybe recently it's been 30 or so vacancies. We have to maintain them as our salary lapse in order just to make the budget every single year. So all this combines into a model where not only would we need to that $2 million to which you alluded, but we would likely need somewhere in the addition of $4 million more than that to get to a point where we think that we can operate our buildings the way we want them to be operated. Okay, so it's in some ways it's an improvement of service, but a reduction in hours. And again, I think our union leadership articulated the on the ground conditions pretty thoughtfully.
Okay, and is it that the 2 million restored plus 4 million, or is it 2 million plus 2 million?
It'd be 2 plus 4.
2 plus 4. And right now you're maintaining about 30 vacancies, that there are 30 vacancies that you can't fill because you don't have the money. So, yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if I mentioned in my test, if the 2 million were restored, we would still be able to provide 7-day service, but we would not have, but we wouldn't have the long days, the days that we open at 9 and close at 8. We would have those as one shift, where they would either be open like 9 to or 8 hours in the morning or 8 hours in the evening, allowing staff to work together. And again, in some ways that is an improvement of the service, although a reduction in the hours.
Okay, that's what I wasn't getting. So that does help me. That to get to 7 days, we need 2 million. To get to replicating hours, we need more than that.
Yes.
And what's the overall budget for library staff? If it's 4 million, what percentage increase would that be over where we are today?
I don't have the math on that, and I don't know if any of us could provide that number immediately, but we're happy to get that back to you.
Okay. And we'll get to Southeast Library and Arthur Kepler, but let me work through. How frequently are the branches short enough on staff to necessitate late openings or early closures? What did that look like this year?
I think we had about 50 late openings or so in FY24. More recently, we've been okay again because we've had the Mount Pleasant Library, which is one of our best staff locations. We've been able to distribute staff there. And then a couple of kind of emergency closings at Bellevue and Shepherd Park allowed us to distribute staff. So it's been a little bit better because of these closures. And this is one of the things that we can't count on next year.
Yeah, so and I was going to ask, reopening Mount Pleasant, Petworth, Southeast Library, that's going to put that much more pressure on your staffing, so that should we be expecting, when that happens, more late openings and unplanned closures?
Oh, absolutely. Without any changes to our hours, we would expect many more of that, many more of those late openings to occur, especially.
Okay. And this is a really difficult budget year, and the idea of reducing library hours, don't want to see that happen. But I don't know what we're going to be able to do. There's a lot of priorities out there, and this is a very high one for me, but it's $2 million to fill the cut. What happens if we did half? What kind of implications might that have for what you could do in terms of hours?
I mean, we can run a number of models. Since I'm under oath, I don't want to commit to anything right here, but $1 million roughly is maybe 12 or 13 bodies that we can hire. That could be conditional an additional day of service, or it could be perhaps looking at like a hub and spoke model where we might have one location in each ward open an additional day. So there are a number of ways to cut it.
Have you looked at the kind of thing that Mr. Pattison talked about earlier? I see that my clock started, but I actually am not going to go for I'll turn it to you. I just wanted you to get settled. Mr. Pattison talked about, one open one day and another one in close proximity open a different day.
Yeah, we actually have. And, we're not married to anything just yet. There is some value to that pairing model where if you're lucky enough, for example, in Upper Ward 4, the Shepherd Park and Tacoma Park libraries are very close to each other. So by alternating, for example, mornings and nights, that makes a lot of sense. Unfortunately, we don't have those pairs everywhere. I think of like the Palisades Library or the Francis Gregory Library or a number of other libraries that are sort of, they don't fall neatly within that model. And I think Mr. Pattison also alluded to the fact that in my history of 30 years working in libraries, especially back in New York, where we had to deal with these real budget cuts back during the recession of 2009, 2010, there's a lot of confusion when the library starts offering staggered hours. We like to think it makes a lot of sense by pairing when you're open in the morning, you're open in the evening. But members of the public just go to their library and they expect it to be open. So being able to convey standardized hours, there's a real benefit to that from a communications and public relations standpoint.
All right, wonderful. I will stop there, and you ready to go and turn to Councilmember Henderson. Welcome, Councilmember Henderson. If you would like to offer an opening statement, you're welcome to, or just turn to question.
No, my opening statement will be, good afternoon. Let's get to questions. Good to see you all. I want to start with collections, because at the end of the day, collections is like the bread and butter of a library. We like books, we want to read, etc. There are lots of changes that were made in the FY25 supplemental. The one that is very confusing to me is to essentially kneecap your collections budget for the remainder of the year. This reduction in FY25 collections. Did you all have an opportunity to suggest something different in terms of, yes, there had to be a reduction, but where to reduce to have, I guess, to minimize the additional strain that is already on a very strained system?
Councilmember, thank you for your question. I try to simplify the work that we do at the library. Oftentimes when I say that, we've got our budget is bodies and books. If you need to find deep savings, in the millions of dollars, we have taken cuts across the board in our programming budget and everywhere else. But if you're not going to do a deep cut to the collections budget, you're going to have to reduce staffing, which my entire testimony is about the problems that we're having with staffing and what we're facing. So there's no good choice. I absolutely agree that libraries are still books, right? I mean, that's the foundation.
It's not as though nobody's going to release a new book for the remainder of the fiscal year.
No, I get it, right? But when we're faced with that or preserving jobs and open hours, the
trade-off is not great. I just sort of wondering in terms of, were there some other alternatives here that could have been offered?
I mean, if we're talking about the FY25 supplemental, you're talking about the carryover funds, which is $2 million. And I mean, no, there's nothing that comes close to that amount of money that there could be a trade-off for. I mean, the only other huge pocket of money was also taken, which was the $1.8 million from the library's revenue generating fund.
Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit. So the mayor has a subtitle, converting your revenue generating activities from that's currently non-lapsing into lapsing, and then decreased it by 150,000 across the financial plan.
I-
Um,
I'm not sure that that fund actually goes to lapsing. We should make sure, I believe that one,
So we keep it in our pots. We just budget the portion that we would need for the following year that we're.
okay, we'll double check, but I believe you're on the list of the funds to switch from lapsing to non-lapsing.
from non-lapsing. to
From
lapsing.
non-lapsing to lapsing,
Yeah.
excuse me. Which I don't think is, and you know, I'm sure we can have a conversation with the chairman as we get to down this line. I don't think that's fair.
It would also be,
Not even just sort of a fair, like in like a ethics affair, but it makes sense that if you are generating revenue, that revenue goes back into the library activities to help support and sustain the work that you all are doing.
and that's been the board's position of the library. And this is something that they've spent a lot of time on in terms of creating policies around, I mean, they even restrict what I can spend on it.
Right.
They, we can't use the revenue generating fund for books. We can't use it for a lot of things. We can only use it to support the MLK Library's revenue generating spaces, as well as our exhibition program and our cultural work.
Okay. I mean, I think that is important to note, because to me, the restrictions that the board has put on the revenue generating fund makes it more like an endowment than just what some people might think is just a slush fund that you guys can just decide, oh, we're going to go to the fund and we're going to now pick up all of these additional costs.
I mean, it's tough. I'll say that while we have been able to generate now upwards of about $1 million a year, the amount of staffing that goes into raising that money is not captured in that number. So for example, when we talk about not just the folks who are doing the booking and managing the space, but the security and maintenance and all the staff that's involved in the passport office, these sorts of things are super staff intensive. And so one of the things that, my board wants to talk about is, at what point are we, we'd possibly be losing money.
Yeah.
Right. And should we continue aggressively trying to market these spaces?
Which is unfortunate, because we've spent a lot of money on these spaces. They're beautiful spaces.
Yeah.
We want them to be open. MLK Library was designed with events in mind. So it would be foolish, in my opinion, for us to revert on that, because that's like wasted dollars. Let me switch from that fund. The Weston Library Firehouse Maintenance line. Now that's in the DGS budget.
Correct.
But the mayor is also proposing to decrease this funding as well. Do you have any concerns about this change?
I mean, only that whatever money that we're investing in those common areas, landscaping, that sort of thing at the Weston Library is going to have to come out of the library's maintenance budget, as opposed to the money that's being generated through the West End Maintenance Fund. So, at the end of the day, it's just another tax on the library's budget if we were to lose that.
Okay. Let me ask about a couple of the capital projects that are planned. So Rosedale Library was supposed to begin in FY29. The funding that was there for FY29 is now gone. I imagine now this means that you will push back the start
Yes.
of this project to
But
when?
there was an increase in the budget. So I don't know now, I haven't looked at the years, but when do we have the design money? What fiscal year does that come in? 27.
27. Okay. DCPL fleet replacements, that was zeroed out in FY26. Did you all have plans for, or a necessary need to replace some of your vehicles?
I think speaking to the staff, we thought that was going to support the continued sort of electrification of the fleet. And as I stated in my testimony, it wouldn't be a major hardship in 2026
Yeah.
specifically.
Okay. That's what I know folks want to talk about the out years, but we just got to talk about
26.
where we are on today. Okay, Southeast Library. I pass it. There seems to be some work that's going on. No, not, I'm being in jest. So in the FY25 supplemental, the mayor is sweeping about 15.5 million, which leaves about 8.5 left. You know, you're under active construction. Like, how do we?
That was a swap
Okay.
with ARPA funds. So
Okay.
yeah, so the funding for the project was not decreased.
All right. I was just like, we normally don't decrease projects in the middle of a construction. So I just wanted to make sure that that was okay. But it's my understanding that there's some concerns about whether or not you have funding for opening day collections there.
Well, you know, during typical years, when we ask for operating impact for a new capital project, that's granted. And this year it wasn't. Again, I understand this is a bad year, but the Southeast Library, you know, prior to its closure, prior to COVID, was probably the third or fourth busiest library in the library system, even in its sort of, you know, uncomfortable 8,000 square foot footprint.
It's cute and cozy.
We're doubling the size of the building. So it's going to be about 18,000 square feet of space. And so we, you know.
I mean, do you guys have books in storage so it won't look empty?
We've got, we do store some books, but because of the length of the closure, we want to make sure that when people come to the library that first day, that we've got books that are not all 3 years old, right?
Yeah.
That they reflect what's been published in the last 6 months and last year. And because it is a busy circulating branch, meaning it is a branch that is busy for readers, not just for computers or that sort of thing.
Right.
You know, we would ordinarily like to invest quite a bit of money into an opening day collection. But yeah, it's an issue. And the staffing issue is probably the biggest concern. Because it's going to be now a library that will compare favorably to any of our 20,000 square foot libraries, but doesn't have the staff of one of those types of buildings.
How many people are we talking about?
I think we requested 4, including a public safety officer. So I think we may have had, because it was always super busy, I think we had, I don't know what we had, probably even more, like 9-ish or so.
Okay, I'm over my time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Henderson. Councilmember Lewis George has joined us. Councilmember Lewis George, would you, if you'd like to make an opening statement, or you can just jump into question?
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Director. It's so good to see you and the entire team here. Just again, always truly one of the bright spots of the District of Columbia, running an excellent system and an excellent program for all the district residents. Particularly want to just thank you in Ward 4 for just your responsiveness to issues that may come up or arise at our libraries. Recently, I know there was an HVAC issue that happened at Juanita Thornton Library. You were on it. You were communicated with us, communicated with the community. It made a huge difference, and we really just appreciated that partnership there. Of course, I want to ask about a few Ward 4 projects and just what has happened in the budget. And so wanted to ask, it looks like the fiscal year 25 supplemental budget provides for 1.3 million to really complete the renovation at Petworth Library. Explain to me sort of what that amount is needed for, and what the new timeline looks like as a result of that.
Sure. And I might ask Jaspreet or Barbara if you feel comfortable to talk about all the specifics of that. If you recall, when we toured, council member, we shared with you that it wasn't until we got a completed design that we actually knew what the necessary budget was.
Yeah.
As with many of these projects, the more you uncover, the more you realize you need. And based on the original budget, we realized that we couldn't do much other than some of the behind the scenes stuff that wouldn't have been a very dramatic change to anybody coming in for the first time after that closure. So we're very pleased that the mayor has allocated $1.3 million. And Jaspreet, maybe you can talk a little bit about what that will get our district residents. Does she have to be sworn in?
She does. We were just having a back and forth on that, but I was gonna let it slide, but thank you very much. If you'd raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you are about to provide to the Committee on Human Services is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Councilmember, we had requested $1.4 million based on the GMP, which is the guaranteed maximum price that our subcontractors had provided us at the time. Obviously, what we received is short of that. There is always, between the time the bids came in and now, we have experienced uptick as well. But we are willing to look at what we can do to proceed with the project. We have permits in hand, so the contractor is ready to roll as soon as we give them the green light. And as we receive the funds, which we understand could be available as early as August, we should be able to close for construction shortly thereafter. Our intent to do construction in the 6 months still remains intact.
Okay. With the difference between the 1.3 and 1.4, if there was any way to, if we plugged any money in 26, is it possible for us to be able to, for the scope of that project to be able to consider the 26 funds, even though they won't be available to the October date?
I think as long as we can get a fiscal sufficiency from our AFO, and
Okay.
we can award the contract at that number, the cash flow could be managed, so the payment is made in the fiscal year 26.
Got it. Okay, yeah, because I've done that with other like DCPS projects where we're trying to do things, so I just wanted to get a sense of that. And then what does that 1.3 get us, and if ultimately 1.4, what does that get us as far as what when we did the walkthrough, we were so excited, and so I'm hoping some of those things that we talked about were possibilities are now made possible as a result of that.
It does eat into our contingency that we always need for a project where we have to open a building. As much due diligence as we can do before construction, there will invariably be things that will uncover themselves when we open the building up. It is advisable to have a decent, healthy contingency. This reduction and the escalation since we submitted the request will eat into our contingency, making us nervous while we are in construction.
Okay, got it. Okay. If we are able to make that additional amount in the 26 budget, that would help with the contingency and the ability for us to see the full scope of that project through.
That is our intent, correct?
Okay, wonderful. Got you. I appreciate that. And, I'll do my best to try to figure out how we can make that happen, because I think it's the project is worth fighting for. And the real scope of what we imagine could be there is great, especially because our Petworth community really wants that. Our young people are there every day. Using it, and it's high trafficked, and they really want to be able to utilize that space. And it also helps with reconfiguring this space to make it better use for the entire community as a whole. So thank you for that. I wanted to ask about Juanita Thornton Library. Am I seeing, is that library getting an increase in funds? And if so, what's, I'm just trying to understand is that an increased amount, and why is there an increased amount there?
Well, we've talked at length with the administration about estimates for escalation, especially for projects that are that far away. I think the number we use is 8%, which is significant. So the administration allocated an additional, what is it, 11 million, 10 million? Almost $11 million.
That's what I saw.
To the budget. So we're now at what, 36, which is, I mean, the mayor would kill me. It doesn't mean that this is ultimately the amount that it's going to cost.
Yeah.
There's so much fluctuation currently now and possibly in the future, but that's certainly going to get us to, closer to what we're going to need. I mean, it's very welcome, but it's also an out-year project, obviously.
Got it. Okay. And what's that out year again? What year?
Design starting in
28, FY 28 is when we have our first allocation coming in,
Okay.
allowing us to start design, and we get some influx of construction funds in FY 30 with opening the collection in FY 31.
Okay. So we're talking about a 28 design, Groundbreaking would be, a groundbreaking would be
FY 30-ish.
FY 30-ish. Got it. Okay. And that's what's accounted for in the mayor's increase of budget, which will fluctuate over time each year, is what we expect to happen.
Right.
Got it. Okay. And so that accounted for amount, I mean, because we could say it's the cost of, things now, but it's so far out, you can't really attribute it to any of the craziness that's happening right now.
Right. I mean, I think it recognizes that what we used to ask for a new library building, whether it was 20 million or 24 million,
Mhm.
that number is well past its
Right.
reality, basically. And so
Gotcha.
it acknowledges that.
It just
That
acknowledges.
new libraries are probably going to cost upwards of, if we start now, $35 million or so.
That is correct.
Got it. As you know, I am still an avid, and my community has asked for, and the Juanita Thornton Shepherd Park community, Ward 4 in general, really has supported a Brightwood Park, Manor Park situation library regarding sort of a Kennedy Street library services. I know that it's a cross-agency thing, and I'll be talking to Deputy Mayor Albert from DMPED and others. I would just wanted to, and so what my community is up in arms about is because they see what is basically what we've heard from various entities within the executive and others is that they're supporting the community in this effort, but then now what we see is a zeroed out of any funds towards a Kennedy Street library service. And so I just wanted to ask you, why is that reflected in the budget? And does that mean what my community was excited about and has asked for repeatedly across the community? I mean, that's ANC 4B, ANC, even every ANC is really ANC 4C, 4D are all sort of supportive of this effort because it touches all of their communities. Is that zero out meaning an abandonment from above that is no longer a library service is something that Kennedy Street is not going to get and does not deserve?
I mean, I can't speak for the mayor and her team and their priorities. I mean, I think what it means if it were to stand is that, it's a difficult year with difficult choices to be made. For this all day long, we've been talking about cuts in hours and the fact that we don't have enough staff to operate the campus that we currently have, let alone operating a campus that's growing, the Southeast Library. We don't have staffing for that project, which is opening next year. So I won't speak for anybody, but for me, that signifies that
There's an abandonment
that
there.
it's not a growth year.
Got it. I understand that, and this is not to you or DCPL. I just think there is a choice in the budget, and we saw, pop up in the budget sort of a Carter Barron pool, that nobody in our community asked for, actually not a single ANC, 4E, 4C, 4D community members, but then an amenity like a library, which would provide endless support and services to neighbors, being cut means to me that some choices are not happening in the best interest of community and for community. And that's something that really needs to be reconsidered. So I'm going to continue to fight for my neighbors at Brightwood Park and Manor Park and for Kennedy Street Library Services. And I'll continue to reiterate that to the agency partners that need to have that. And I appreciate you all's conversations around that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Lewis George. I'm going to go back on a different dimension from the hours cut, because we talked about the possible hours cut, but you've also made mention to the risk of programming changes and programming cuts that would be associated if we couldn't fill the whole of the 24.5 FTEs. So what kinds of things are you referring to there? What would be the implication for programming?
It's interesting, council member. One of the issues that we're having now is because we are so beholden to keeping our libraries open 61 hours that we don't have the ability to do outreach as much as we would like to. We don't have the ability to go in to do programming in our branches. As I mentioned during the first round of questions, if we're reducing hours, we're making a statement that we're gonna prioritize programming. And so I would anticipate that we'll actually be able to do more programming in some ways. Of course, with fewer bodies in general, you know, what we've seen over the past few years with the difficulty hiring youth services staff, our children's library programming in-house has gone way down. The fact that we were having a difficult time hiring youth services staff as recently as a year ago, we were just talking yesterday, you know, given our ability to hire again, and understanding the changes that we've seen in the job market, especially in DC, we probably wouldn't have the same troubles hiring now if we had the ability to hire than we did a year ago when we couldn't hire and had the authority to.
Okay.
I
hear
could have said that more eloquently,
No,
I'm sure.
I definitely hear you, but I mean, right now you're subject to the hiring freeze, right?
Yes, yeah,
And
with a few waivers, but not many.
and how many positions were you in the process of trying to fill before the hiring freeze came?
All of them.
All of them?
Yeah.
And did you have candidates?
We definitely have been through the vetting process and interview process and have some pending hires, so they are on hold right now.
So, and actually for those people, if we could restore the dollars, then you might have a pipeline of people, some people who would be close to ready to go.
Correct.
And is it the case that your experience in trying to do hiring now is different than a year ago, given the job market in the district?
Well, I mean, we've been frozen now for how long?
About 2 months.
3 months, so.
About 2 months, about 60 days.
Yeah, but maybe prior to that, I don't know if either Tiffany or Barbara, you guys want to talk about what we've been facing in terms of
Well,
rules.
I think we've seen a more robust interest in applying to our positions. We're definitely getting a lot of good candidates. We're not seeing a lot of attrition, so that's also interesting situation as well. But we're getting good candidates and have a broader pool of I think a broader talent than we've had in the past. So I think that's a good thing.
Interesting. It's sort of a moment of opportunity in a certain way if you had the ability to be doing the hiring.
Correct.
I'll get back to that topic in a little bit, but so we talked about hours, we talked about programming. Interesting that you think part of what you would do is consolidate operations, which might allow you to do more programming even in the shortened hours. What about revenue generating activities? If we see these kinds of cuts, and I know there's a whole separate conversation about revenue generating activities, and I'm with Councilmember Henderson, and that it doesn't seem fair that the libraries would be doing revenue generating activities but not be able to benefit from them. It also creates a bizarre incentive structure or negative incentive structure. We see this in other settings. I want the libraries to have an incentive to open up and to be doing more and generating revenue in those ways, and to take that away has all kinds of impacts. But with the separate from all of those issues, if we couldn't restore the staff, what impact would you expect that to have on your revenue generating capacity?
That doesn't impact our revenue generating activities. If you're alluding to those 24 and a half FTE, those, that doesn't impact our revenue generating. I mean, philosophically, it could mean, again, this is really up to my board. If the library is not actually generating revenue for the library, then we are using a lot of FTE for activities that are not library, that are not benefiting the library, and that's worthy of a discussion.
Can you say that one more time? I'm sorry.
Meaning, if the library is no longer benefiting from the revenue that's being generated, yet we are still investing in revenue generating staff, passport office staff, maintenance staff, security staff, public services staff that support the whole event ecosystem, then my board asks me, why are we not putting those positions to public services use if they're not benefiting the library?
And then.
This
we-
is hypothetical.
Yeah, no, I hear you. And then we have radically less programming in all of our libraries because we're not fostering it. We've taken the people who would have been developing those things and put them into other roles.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. I think you sort of got at this when you say your gut is you'd need 4 million more in public services in order to be able to do the task.
Right. And this is, again, speaking to what you heard earlier from our union representatives. We want to draw a line in the sand at some point to say that, like, the how we've been operating for the past few years is not sustainable. So the number that I provided you, the 4 million, almost 4 million on top of the 2 million, that's to get us to a point where we feel that we are back to being a well-staffed library system that can do all the programming that we want to do, that won't have two people working alone together, that'll have all the bells and whistles that we need to operate how we feel we need to operate.
So there's a recent Court of Appeals decision that says that we can get access to the budget requests that the different agencies make. But can I assume that if you would have made a budget request that could have called for an increase of $4 million in public services to the mayor?
I mean, I'd have to think about it, but we're always asking for more staff and more books. I mean, that's pretty much all we ever ask for.
Okay. All right, back on Southeast Library. So just, there's been a fair amount of conversation. You heard the testimony about a potential delay in its opening.
Yeah, there's no, right.
There's no potential.
We have no concerns right now about a delay in the Southeast Library opening.
And no concerns that it will be ready, but then there will be a delay. There was testimony earlier.
There's always typically a couple of months between substantial completion of a project and the opening of the library. Typically, it's not much more than 2 months. Assuming that the building, for example, if we got the keys to the building on January 1, we would be hopefully able to open on March 1. Again, we're still in construction, so we don't know, but our goal, again, has been to open in the first half of calendar year of 2026.
Okay, and then the facility at Arthur Capper, will that stay open until the Southeast Library opens?
We did not get funding for that in 26, so
that will sunset September 30th, unless there's
yes.
Okay. And then in terms of when Southeast opens, you don't have additional staff, but you'd have to draw staff from other places.
And we're baking this into the staffing model, the hours of service that I've talked to you
Described.
about. So this idea of whether it's 5 days if we don't get the 2 million, or 7 days with consolidated shifts, that incorporates the fact that we did not get operating impact on Southeast. So the Southeast issue is not it doesn't change the equation of what I've provided testimony for.
But there's a couple of things. There's Mount Pleasant, there's Petworth, and there's Southeast, and each one of those kinds of comes on stream. And as each one comes on stream, does it create that it increases the pressure on your staffing?
Right. Well, Mount Pleasant is a short-term closure, and we hope to open it, I think, on June 30th. So, it's a Band-Aid for a 4-month project. And, Petworth will also be, what did Jaspreet say? That was also a 6-month project. That's a bit longer. So that's another Band-Aid. But by the end of the fiscal year, we anticipate that every location will be open. And that's what we have to sort of budget for now.
Okay, and then on Southeast, what do we need to be ready? Like how much money for staffing to buffer against the increased demands on staffing? And how much money for collections would be required in order to for it to open smoothly and without exerting undue pressure on other libraries around the system?
Again, in order for us to staff Southeast the way we staff our other buildings, we've asked for 4 additional staff members. And that, I think we budgeted at $372 million. Sorry, $1,000. Sorry about that. Welcome, Councilmember Parker. You wouldn't believe what I've got to say today. And the opening day collection, again, our aspiration, it was $350,000. It's fluid, obviously, it's not a science, but we know that the Southeast Library is one of the busiest libraries for readers. And so a robust opening day collection, I know, would be very well appreciated by the Capitol Hill community over there.
So that comes to 700,000, 350.
Right, and then
plus
there's maintenance, landscaping, all that stuff, security, technology, and monitoring. So we've got contracts with Johnson Controls and all these other companies that basically keep our buildings humming. And so that has to be part of the equation as well. So the total that we've requested is $1.2 million.
Okay. All right. I think I will stop there. Okay, so I will turn to Councilmember Lewis, George, and then we'll come back to you, Councilmember Parker.
Right. I just have 2 more questions. In addition to the Kennedy Street Library Commons being cut, we've heard about cuts from the Southeast Library, and so I was just trying to from the Southeast Library, and so community members reached out, even though I'm Ward 4, they're like, this is Southeast's issue for everyone. What I'm understanding is the library itself is not cut, but just we don't have the funds for the services. Is that what is?
What we're saying is that the construction budget was not cut
Got
in
it.
Southeast. We do have a complement of staff that works there currently, or when it's not closed, that will be returning to the library. About
Understood.
8 or 9, but because it's going to be double the size, we've requested 4 more. And if we don't get it, it's just a simple equation of taking our existing complement of however many staff we have around the system, divvying it up and figuring out how many hours we can be open across the library system. And we've already more or less provided that information based on
Got it.
based on the proposed budget.
Understood. And then speaking of hours, people have reached out and said, Councilmember, in this budget, are we going to see hour reductions to any of our Ward 4 libraries? In this budget, will there be a hour reduction changes to
Yes.
any of our Ward 4 libraries?
There would be an across the board reduction in hours.
Okay. If we don't do,
If not, well,
if the council doesn't, I guess, finish that statement for me.
if there's to be no reduction at all,
Mhm.
I believe we would need somewhere in the area of $6 million.
$6 million. Okay, got it. And then the last thing is regarding Chevy Chase Library. Someone came to our hearing, public witnesses, Mr. Randy Speck, and he noted that he thought he saw what was a reduction in funding towards that project about,
No.
and I hadn't seen it, but I just wanted to make sure I'm clarifying that there was no reduction in
No.
that project amount.
We actually got a modest increase, I believe, at Chevy
Okay.
Chase, about 150,000 for collections,
Got
actually.
it. Okay, that's what I wanted to make sure. Okay,
Yeah.
so we shouldn't see that. And then as we contemplate the new Chevy Chase Commons, which will include the library and the recreation center, I guess, if this project ends up in sort of, I don't I hope it, if it ends up in some type of like litigation, et cetera, whatever happens with the project, will that delay what DCPL has to do or needs to do to basically renovate this project, but also support the project? Because it's all intertwined together.
Yeah, it's all, like, the library can't move forward
Without
unless,
anything
unless
else.
the entire
Project
development
is moving
moves forward.
Okay.
So.
Got it. Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Lewis George, Councilmember Parker.
Thank you, and good to see you again, Director.
Likewise.
I will jump right in, and I will acknowledge some of these questions may have already been touched on as I'm coming in between hearings. But under the proposed budget, the operating budget increased slightly, while the capital budget almost doubled, increasing by nearly $16 million. You mentioned this will support Petworth Library renovations, Congress Heights, Chevy Chase, Deanwood, the new Edgewood, Eckington, Rosedale, and Shepherd Park libraries. Will the entire capital increase go to fund improvements to existing libraries?
Our general operating, our general improvements fund is what we use for capital improvements. And there was a modest increase there in 2026 of 3.5 million. And that's our entire general improvements budget.
Okay. I'm going to keep moving. Under the budget, it appears the largest decrease in programming is in the amount of 1.5 million on the line item neighborhood library services. You went from 24.7 million to 23.2 million, which also shows a loss of about 7.5 FTEs. What is the rationale behind making this cut?
We didn't make the cut, but this is part of the overall personnel cut, correct?
Yes. So overall, there's 2 FTEs that were eliminated, which are the 2 capper positions. The others are just reallocated to different projects. Adult services actually brings one in. Children and youth services, 2 of them actually go out. MLK, so a net of 3.5 moves in from MLK to neighborhood libraries. And then events, there's one position that is going out to events.
So there's a loss of 2, and then the other 5.5 are just being moved around. You know, I would say this neighborhood library services is described as offering programs, services for residents and neighborhoods across the district, including story time, summer reading, activities for children, teens, book clubs, etc. And it's curious that given where we are in the city in terms of public safety and any number of needs, we would be trying to pull back on these types of programs and services.
Ultimately, we're not, council member, the crosswalk that our AFO is describing is really internal. The big issue for us in terms of providing what you are suggesting is the potential loss of 24 FTE, all of whom deliver direct public services. Internally, the back and forth between one line item versus another is in no way indicative of the library deprioritizing the services that you've described. Once in a while, we will take one position and we'll move it to somewhere else, but not out of a grand sort of philosophical decision to de-emphasize programming. That's all we want to do. That's all we've been talking about all afternoon.
Understood. You mentioned in your testimony that vacancies will result in 2 days of closure per week.
If the budget holds and the 24.5 vacant, if we cannot fill those 24.5 vacant positions, it exacerbates a number of lingering issues for the library, and we would be forced to close the library system 2 days a week.
And that's across the entire system, or would you explore different options per location?
We would not explore different options per location, but we would keep the MLK library open its existing hours.
And what is needed to be able to keep hours as they are? You need all of those FTEs?
In order to keep, we need much more than that. I'm afraid. We need, as I've mentioned before, close to $6 million in order to keep what we're doing. The issue is, Councilmember, what we're doing today is not sustainable. I've testified that we've had staffing shortages going back several years.
Yes.
We've been relying on building closures to redistribute staff to keep our buildings open. We've had more than 50 late openings and early closures in FY24. So what we are suggesting is that we have to move away from that model where we need robust staffing to keep our buildings open, but also provide the programming that we're not providing, the outreach that we're not providing. And that is that 6 million or so number that I'm alluding to.
And are you subject to the hiring freeze currently?
We have been, yes.
So even if there was a way to get $6 million, there's no material change in the.
Oh, well, I mean, yeah, I mean, you could give us anything you want. If we can't use it, we don't need it. Right.
Okay. I mean, I would love to problem solve with you all and working with Councilmember Fruman. I just think that would be such a travesty for our library system to have to close for 2 days a week. And I understand the very real challenges that the system is facing. So that's in no way a criticism, but I do want us to explore every option available.
Yeah, honestly, and again, just sort of underscoring what we've talked about, the $2 million restoration allows us to remain open 7 days a week. It still reduces our hours somewhat, but not the draconian cut that two days would be.
So 2 million is a baseline, 6 million is the top line request.
Roughly.
Got it, roughly. Okay. And I would just go on record saying, again, I think this is a matter of academics. I think it's a matter of public safety. It's a matter of just citywide vibrancy that we need our library system open and well funded. Under subtitle H in the BSA, there are plans to transfer remaining funds that would have been held by a specific fund to the general fund. Both the Books from Birth Fund and the Library Collections account will be affected here. The Books from Birth Fund funds the Books from Birth program, which provides books to all children registered with the program. And the Library Collections account is used solely for the purpose of procuring books and other library materials, maintaining and enhancing the collection of the library system. Can you speak to this?
Sure. So the Books from Birth Fund at this point, because there have been fewer registered participants, so there are fewer babies in the district, we have been able to accumulate some funding that is proposed being swept. What that funding does is that the loss of that funding does not prevent us from registering new babies to the program, so they will still get their books. But we do rely on that carryover funding to do things like our Star Festival, the big Sing, Talk, and Read Festival. We do Books from Birth graduation events. We do other programs to support toddlers, basically the birth to 5 set. And so we would not be able to do that if we were to seed that almost $500,000 in the Books from Birth Fund. And
So let me, just for clarification, what I'm hearing you say is we wouldn't do away with the program entirely, but we wouldn't be able to
promote it as much as we'd like to.
Got it. Got it.
Yeah. So you would still, that transactional element would still exist. Basically, the book delivered to eligible families. What wouldn't exist is some of the basically the programs.
Yeah.
Like,
but where is that now going to be funded if this subtitle were to move forward? I know you're saying you have enough funding, but where should we expect that money to be pulled from?
The money is
for the Books from Birth program.
It's in our carryover fund right now. in 20, it's in the library's budget currently, and it's being proposed to be swept, if I'm understanding your
Yes,
question.
exactly. But what I heard in your testimony is, I thought was you saying, but we'll still be able to do the program.
We'll be able, I'm sorry, I should separate the word from program. There are programs that are bring your families to the library and we can sing and dance and learn and all that stuff.
Understood.
And then there's the program of Books from Birth, which is actually the mechanism, the delivery of books to people's homes. So the basic delivery of one book a month to the home of every child under the age of 5 will be able to continue with the loss of that carryover funding. What will not be able to continue are the events, I should say,
Understood.
that are related to supporting the literacy, the growth of toddlers. So, and
Understood.
I alluded to a couple of them in my testimony.
Understood.
So sorry about that.
It's also worth noting literacy is also a key priority for the district right now. And so I get that you're not in an easy position, but I look forward to working with Councilmember Fruman and colleagues to see how we can reverse some of the damage here. But thank you all for your time.
Yeah, and I should just say, the recurring budget is not cut for Books from Birth.
Understood. That's what I was confused about. Okay,
Sorry,
got
thank
it,
you.
Got it.
You
Thank
should just ask Joy questions,
So-
ultimately.
So I will say, I
I'm
don't
just
know if,
here to be good looking.
Councilmember Parker, if you're going to stay for another round or not, but on the 2 million is the bottom and the 6 million is the top. That's just on the public service employees. That's Councilmember Henderson talked about circulation. That's a whole nother bucket. So don't want this is a challenging budget environment, and there's a couple of different places that we're going to need to focus. Again, everybody's interested in the same things, but just to make sure I fully understand. So you have the 2 digital navigators who are at Arthur Capper. Arthur Capper is not going to be operating after September 30th. What happens to those people?
Depending on whether we can, ideally, we've got vacancies and we would be able to absorb those folks into our overall staffing.
So presumably, if the hiring freeze ends at the end of FY25, and that's when those positions would be terminated in that spot, then those people might be able to be absorbed, but you'd need to have the money. This is where the 24.5 positions, you might have 2 of them that you could fill. And then we talked also about folks who you are already interviewing. You might be in a position to make a big jump on that straight out of the box.
Yeah, that's the goal. We do know, as Ms. Jumper alluded, that attrition has slowed down quite a bit for us, but ideally we would be able to absorb those positions.
And then part of what I'm hearing, we've heard from different testimony that there may be obstacles in hiring, but on the other hand, I'm hearing today that things may be going more smooth. The freeze to the side. Otherwise, what are the other snags in getting people on board? Are there things that we should be focused on, try to make it easier for you to bring folks on board?
Yeah, talk about some snags. We've got some.
I hate to talk about this. Well, clearly, one of the snags, which already the director already spoke to, was just the children's librarian pool. We've had challenges there. We've been working diligently to try to find other attractive ways to bring candidates in those spaces as we're competing with other industries or other entities, public schools and other school systems where they have summers off. And we're trying to find a way that would make our environment more attractive to bring people on. Looking at shifts in the way the job descriptions are written and just, throwing the net out wider to try to attract people who may be interested in that area. I would say that's probably the most difficult. We've also had some challenges with specialized positions like risk management. We've tried a couple of times and had very little success. So we had to do a workaround by training internally to find someone to take on that responsibility. So I would say those are primarily the areas that we're having the most challenges.
But again, we haven't been able to sort of, muscularly seek new staff since the contraction of the federal government. So it could be a different, I mean, it is a different landscape than it was even just, a few short months ago. So, we'd love the opportunity to try.
Right.
Right.
Well, one of the things that we've talked about at other hearings is for the children's librarians, is there the possibility of part-time positions where somebody who's a librarian at a school works part-time for you as well? A different area where, and one of the things that's a bright spot is the hiring of some new public safety officers. And can you talk to me about, are there challenges in bringing those folks on board? What need do you see that that has to be filled with those positions? How do you see that rolling out?
Sure, I'll give you like the top level. If the budget passes with the 6 additional FTE, that complements 5 that we got last year, which is 11, and it brings us up to 36. Which is, close to our ideal, frankly, which is really good for us. It has not been a major challenge recently to bring public safety officers on, although it had been maybe a couple of years ago. But Tiffany, do you want to add?
I was gonna say, yeah, it's similar to the children's librarians where previously it was more challenging, but more recently we've gotten robust candidates and the training component has tightened up and we're able to get people commissioned quicker, more efficiently, and out to support the branches and the MLK library. So we have a good candidate pool currently.
Oh, good. Love to hear that there's another bright spot. I mean, my impression was the goal was 1 per branch. Is that right? And how close to that are you?
We're getting close with the 6 that are in the proposed budget. I should say that even that requires a little bit of a qualification because when we say 1 per branch, that does not mean 1 for every open hour that that just means 1 dedicated officer, but that dedicated officer is not working 61 hours a week, for example. So it's just somebody who's there most of the time, but not all of the time. Although part of the complement of staff includes roving officers so that we can just have just more of a presence, frankly.
And we're getting close.
Yeah.
So that's good. Is the need today different than it was 3 years ago? What is the role that these folks are playing?
The need, I think, has been greater over the past few years. I mean, I think just ask yourself, do we see more things happening in the district that requires law enforcement? And if the answer is yes, then the answer would be yes for the library as well. Libraries are barrier-free institutions. Anyone can come in. We don't ask questions. We offer technology. We offer air conditioning, we offer heat in the winter, and those lack of barriers also will often introduce challenges. Ideally, we're not addressing every challenge with law enforcement, but overwhelmingly, staff want to feel supported with trained law enforcement staff to help out. The mental health specialists have been great. The peer navigators, who are the individuals with lived experience of homelessness, have been great. But I think, people want to know that there is law enforcement at the ready should it be needed.
And I think it may be another bright spot in that the 2 mental health positions from FY25 are continued into FY26.
Correct.
Does that meet your need there, or do you feel like you need more?
That's another philosophical question, council member, that we talked about, I think, a lot at our oversight hearing. It really depends on what the library, fundamentally, what do we want to be? If we want to be a full throttle human services agency, then 2 mental health specialists doesn't come close to what we need. If we are there to be supportive of the human services ecosystem, then 2 might be enough. But from my vantage point and from the vantage point of the team here and probably most of the staff, we are smack in the middle of that ecosystem and not fully staffed to do it properly.
But if you're, and do you feel like what is happening is your task is to support this other infrastructure in the city? Or do you feel like you've been given the staffing to do that role, to be almost a liaison to other services, but being called upon to deliver the actual services?
The former. We've not, this is an added responsibility that libraries have taken on over the years as either there have been, more residents in need of services. The library is a space that people gravitate to. Where else would you go if you were in a situation where you needed either, information, or you needed to get out of the cold, or you needed access to, to email, or you were, hoping for help with a job application. I mean, this all falls to the library. Some of it we're good at, some of it we're not equipped for as much as we would like to be. And certainly, I mean, we had Mr. Sheptok, who was testifying earlier about, how he appreciates, being able to sleep at the library. And, that's something that we're not equipped to do, right? That creates incredible challenges for us. And it creates barriers to participation for many members of the community who don't feel welcome at the library. So, there's a line that is crossed, and sadly we cross it all the time here, where we are being we're in a position to provide services that we don't have the staffing for, the training for, or the infrastructure for.
And it is striking, the similarity between your testimony and the testimony of the union representatives, and both, like, it's hard to picture solving all of these issues in this budget. We can try to solve what we can try to solve in this budget, but the theme of being asked to do a lot but not having the resources to do all the things that you're asked to do comes through loud and clear. I'm going to pivot away from that a little bit to, and there were questions asked about circulation already, the $1 million cut to circulation. This, whatever it was last year, at 5.4,
3 points, it was 4.7.
4.7, and then goes down to 3.7. And, but the cost of things goes up.
Correct.
And the 4.7 last year might be the right number, might not be the right number.
Probably not the right number.
So I guess I have the idea, and I wish, some of my colleagues were here, but I'll convey it to them, that there's a baseline ask of restore us to where we were last year, but what would it take to have a circulation budget that you thought was adequate? Not that you thought was, because when you look at other cities, the circulation budgets can be much, much higher. But just to get to where you think minimally you should be, how much of an increase off of the 3.78 are you talking about?
I mean, again, if we're talking an ideal scenario, without being greedy, I would say that the library system, and it's not the library system, it's what our residents want and demand, it would be closer to $7 or $8 million per year. And, just our numbers bear it out, right? We've got the highest circulation that we've ever had at the DC Public Library System. That's all people want, is more of our stuff. Ebooks have been a great boon for residents. Even our print collections are still, especially for kids, is still in great demand. So, our numbers bear out the need for more. Understanding that even in better economic times, it's been harder to get beyond that 4.7 number. It was, frankly, not that it was, it was in some ways helpful that our spending was so limited during the pandemic that we had this carryover, this budget of $2 million that we could at least, for the next couple of years, hopefully try to spend. But even that carryover budget was untouchable because it had been marked for mid-year cut. So we haven't been able to even use that.
And what, I think wait times, for example, for an ebook average had been like 36 days. Is that,
It's a lot. It's 50 days now, if I'm not mistaken.
has it gone up? That's the question.
Yeah, 51 days is the average. Yeah.
And 51 days, is that from a report from the most recent quarter, or is that an average over FY 25? I think it was 36 days in FY 24,
We would have to get back to you.
but it's going up. The waits are
has,
getting
yeah.
longer.
Yeah. It goes down if you remove Councilmember Henderson from
It goes down if you remove her because you make her
she
wait
asks for
longer.
a lot. Yeah.
But you
she-
make her
she's a
wait
big
longer,
user.
the average would go,
Right. If
uh,
she weren't requesting books.
yeah,
as
I
much
see,
as
I
she
see. It
is.
would take
So,
it. Okay, great.
Never mind.
All right, well, let's see if we can figure out a way to make her pay. And have you tried to project out if you had $1 million cut, what impact that might have on ebook waits? And
Yeah, I mean, look, there are a number of ways to slice it. I think that our collections team has estimated a reduction of about 35,000 fewer books. It's something, honestly, it's something that we can go back and forth on. One argument is that as the numbers go down, you rely on what people want the most, which is ebooks. There's another argument that says if the numbers are contracting, maybe we have to introduce more friction into the process by buying more print books, forcing people to actually physically visit the library. And and print books are a lot cheaper. Your average print book for an adult is $18 versus now $65 or $70 for an ebook. So there are a number of ways to do it. There's no right way to do it, but the number that we presented in our responses to the 35,000 fewer books, that's basically more or less spending roughly on in the same manner that we spend that we've been spending historically recently.
proportionally on
Yes.
ebooks versus.
Yeah, roughly.
Okay.
Yeah.
We've heard about the $200,000 cut to the oral history program. How much is left for oral histories, and what impact is that going to have on the program?
In terms of, I actually, do we know what the balance is for the oral history? I'm sorry? Well, right, in the it's eliminated in 26.
eliminated
Oh,
going
right,
forward.
right. I didn't know if you were asking about what our existing authority was.
No, I
Okay.
was, so the 200,000 is zeroing out.
That's
the oral
basically,
history.
that's the entirety of the budget per year.
Okay. And there's also, I think there's $194,000 reduction related to step increases.
Correct.
What does that mean? Does that mean people who would have reached a level of seniority that they should get a step increase,
Correct.
they don't get it?
Right, and that's a citywide reduction. And so that 194 is for our eligible staff. Do we know how many people that would impact?
Head count?
166.
And is that consistent with a collective bargaining agreement? So are those people outside of a collective bargaining agreement, or are those folks inside?
I believe these are only for represented staff.
They made a distinction. I'm not sure
Okay.
there was a distinction between collective bargain or non-collective bargain.
Okay. So, okay, we've been talking about the proposed FY 26 budget and you've talked about the non-lapsing funds in the FY 25 supplemental. Some of those were made in conjunction with the major proposals in the BSA to turn these funds from non-lapsing to lapsing, meaning whatever remains unspent at the end of the fiscal year would return to the district general fund, as opposed to remaining available for libraries to continue investing in library services. And you've talked about the 2 million swept from the library collections. and 2 million swept from the revenue generating funds, and almost 500,000, I think, came up that was swept from the books from birth fund. And you've talked about this a little, but why was there as much money as there was sitting in those pots that the mayor could then grab?
So I mentioned with books from birth, we've had fewer registrants over the past few years, so that is why that pot has increased. With collections, I mentioned a little while ago, it's been an incremental increase in due to less money that we were spending during the pandemic. We got a lot of money during for MLK's opening day collections, and MLK opened during the heart of the pandemic, so we held on to that. Was there a third reason that I can't remember? Anyway, so that's the reason that and also that we just haven't been able to spend it for the past
Because
couple
of
of
the
years
mid-year
because it needs to be rebudgeted every year, and by the time it's rebudgeted, we can't use it. So so that's that. And then the revenue generating, this is a new program for us. We didn't start generating revenue until 2021. And as a sort of a conservative, independent government agency, I believe that the first year there was a $300,000 budget authority for revenue generating, and then that's subsequently gone up to 500,000. But we've been making $1 million a year from our event space, our passport office, and then some smaller revenue generating activities. This year, I think our revenue generating authority was at 800,000 or so, 850, which is great. But that's basically the reason why it's been so, it's amassed to the point it has been, is because the authority was much less than what we were bringing in.
So what can we do to get out of this loop? Because this is happening with a lot of different funds all around in different agencies. Is there one thing is to say that the funds are non-lapse, maintain them as non-lapsing, but just because they're non-lapsing doesn't mean that the administration won't come in the next budget and sweep them, and then we have to deal with it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess just having a better idea earlier on in the fiscal year whether we will have access to those funds or not would be super helpful.
I mean, what about, could the funds be held by a separate entity? Could the funds be held by the foundation? Is there a place that they could go where they couldn't be swept, where they would be used to support the library?
I mean, I don't think that there's anything that could be done that couldn't be undone through rescinding legislation created to do so. I mean, that's my non-legal opinion.
Okay. Yeah. I have questions about why would the mayor do this, but the mayor's doing this in all kinds of settings, and I'm asking you, I do think it'd be worthwhile to think creatively about if there isn't something out there. I mean, the idea of if the money was not in a government agency that the mayor had oversight over, if the money went into the foundation, she couldn't sweep it, could she?
I mean, no, but whatever mechanism would be needed to create the possibility for that money to be transferred to the foundation that mechanism could be broken, right? So whatever legislation that could be created could be rescinded. It happens all the time. So,
yeah, I mean, we can have this conversation at a different time, but if the dollars over time, like say the revenue generating fund, if the revenue generating fund every time fees for renting the space at MLK didn't go into a library account, went into an account that was a separate entity that was not a formal government entity. So if it was authorized to happen that way, and then the money was outside of her reach, she couldn't grab it. And then she could say in a BSA, no, it has to go to the library. And we could say, no, it goes into this other pot.
I mean,
Trying to be creative.
ideally, we are spending, I mean, our goal is not to create large balances in non-lapsing accounts. We want to spend as we go with some flexibility. As I mentioned, for books, for example, we don't want to have to stop spending in the spring, so everything is in our possession by the end of the fiscal year. Similarly, we've got a laundry list of projects at MLK Library that we would love to spend some of that revenue generating on things that support all of our work on the Gallery Place Chinatown Task Force, reimagining the loggia underneath the MLK Library programmatically. We've got big ideas with, and the revenue generating fund would be, by virtue of the board's policy, we would be able to spend it on improvements in the building. So our question, I mean, look, all we want to do is be able to spend it as we get it with a little bit of flexibility, less about hoarding it or saving it. These are not endowments. These are not rainy day funds. This is money that, we created these programs so that we could spend these dollars, and that's our ultimate goal.
Yeah, I mean, I hear you, and I'm not trying to facilitate hoarding. I mean, I think that there is the question of the independence of the library. I mean, you're doing all of these different things, and you're nominally independent, and yet you're not treated as independent in the way that I think would make sense. But this, for me, comes up because of a role I played at what was then called Wilson High School, where we used to rent the field and the gym, and the dollars from those rentals stayed at the school and were used to support the athletic programs. And it was all subject to a strict set of rules, but it created an incentive to open up the facilities to others, and because it gave a benefit to the host institution. And that's the dynamic I want to see for you. And I'm worried that this perennial sweep takes that away. And it's not that that you don't have the ability to hoard. It's that you have no incentive to open up or to do these extra things because it's just a burden and you don't get any benefit out of it.
I mean, that last part is a fair point that I mentioned earlier. This is not just generating revenue. There's a huge investment in staff time in all the revenue generating activities. And that is something that, again, you mentioned we are independent. I do report to a 9-member board of trustees. It will ultimately be my board that will make a determination on the level of effort the library should be making if we're not generating revenue to support library activities.
Yeah, and so, and I don't want to belabor it, but I mean, this is bigger than the libraries. It happens in a whole bunch of different places where the mayor sweeps these funds. And so once she's swept them, then for us, we have to take from someplace else in order to fix it. And in this year, it's particularly hard it will be particularly hard to fix many things. And so we as an institution need to try to figure out how do we get out of this hamster wheel where we do this every year, and nobody's come up with the perfect way yet, but looking for it.
And I assume this year's the hardest year in recent memory to do that, right? So
really hard. And
Yeah.
my committee,
No.
people say, oh, is libraries part of human services because of the different role? But my committee, human services, like the needs that I need to address are enormous. The library's needs are very, very important to me, but it's a hard year.
Yeah, I mean, nobody's cutting our budget because they didn't like the Leonardo da Vinci exhibition or the Green Book exhibition or all the great things that we did. So, no hard feelings. I'm just describing the impact.
Okay. So the Parklands Turner Congress Heights project received an increase of 7 million, the vast majority in FY26. I know this is a much needed project being done in collaboration with WMATA, and the capital plan says the project should break ground this summer. Is that right? When do you expect this project to start? I see. You want to come up?
Well,
And-
I'll let you know that there's a big caveat to our beginning construction, and that is an adjacent construction of a new 13th Street Southeast that has to run to the west of the library. And that project has to be completed before we can begin construction. So that's and I don't believe Barbara or Jess Breed have any information about when that's happening. I do believe that DGS has the contract. Jess Breed, you might have some additional information.
That's right, Rich. There is a contract award that's been given to Fort Myer by DGS. DGS is being relied on by DIMPAD to construct at 13th Street. And we are trying to get our library construction, not have to wait till the construction is finished, but get it to a point where a contractor can mobilize. So there is a strong dependency of the 13th Street project on the Congress Heights library construction.
So I think there was I thought I was hearing it can't start until the road's finished, but you're saying maybe there is a way that it can start before the road's
That's what
finished?
we are trying to do,
That's
correct?
what you're trying to do.
Correct.
And if you aren't able to do that, how long do we think it'll take for the road to be finished?
That is to be determined.
Like months or years?
I mean, it's not our project.
It's not our project,
So,
correct?
yeah.
Okay. And in terms of the funding that's in the budget now, you talked about like all of these things, the cost of them have gone up and up and up, but you feel good about the amount of money that you have in the budget for that project?
We feel great about it, but the uncertainty around when we can start does create additional risk. I mean, I think that unless you're doing something, starting tomorrow, all the numbers that we have are for beginning immediately and may have to be reevaluated depending on any unforeseen delays.
Okay, and all right, we'll see. I want to be hopeful.
But we're very happy with that enhancement, and we're super grateful to the mayor and her team for that.
And on the Rosedale project, when do you expect that'll start in? It seems like money moved around. Like there was money in FY 29 and money in 30, and I think that's gone, but more money in another place. What's the expectation for the start and finish of Rosedale, and are the dollars in the budget sufficient?
Where are we in the? So we have design dollars in 26.
Correct.
So we can begin the project next year.
The design,
Correct.
but, and then construction, is the hope that design in 26, construction 27, 28, and there's no need for money in 29 and 30 that had been in 29 and 30 before?
The issue that we also have to contend with at Rosedale is that there's been overwhelming support from the community to rebuild the new library on the site of where the co-located recreation center library is. And so that will absolutely provide some additional considerations that we have to investigate before committing to a schedule. When we talk library schedules, we generally talk about those projects that we are fully in control of. So if you knock down the Cleveland Park Library and rebuild it, we know exactly how long that's going to take, give or take a few months. But when we start talking about, okay, we have to maybe, slice off a piece of the existing rec center and expand and encroach upon some of the space at the rec center to build the full-size library, that's going to require some additional consideration. But ideally, based on where the budget is, we would begin design next year.
And I guess now I'm thinking about funding for staff over time, because one of the things that you said is you're going to be firing on all cylinders. Everything will be open, but then it could be in this setting that you would close a site because you're going to be building on the same site as it. Is that
but it's also, you know, probably doubling the size of the space. And if you recall, actually, maybe you might not have been the committee chair at the time, but, you know, one of the reasons that we had great pause about the original concept for the Brightwood Park Library was that we had provided the committee an overall number of additional staff needed based on the increases of all these libraries, Edgewood, Eckington, and Rosedale, and Congress Heights, and Deanwood. I mean, we're talking about a delta of 45 maybe staff members that we don't have now, but we would need because the spaces are all increasing. So over time, the need will be greater than it is today. Right now, we say our ideal scenario is 300 public services staff in our 25 neighborhood libraries. That's going to go up to, you know, 340 or so by the time all these locations are built.
And I mean, for this year,
We won't need them this year.
No, but I'm worried about FY26, but I am also concerned about the out year budgets. So the out year budgets are for staff, are they flat despite the fact that with greater square footage, there's going to be higher need, or is that captured in the out year budgets now?
We submit an operating impact plan for all of our projects. And again, you know, it's been funded every year, but this year. So, I mean, that is a commitment that it's an agreement, right? That we make with the city that if we agree that we're going to build a bigger library, that's what people want. We're going to get 30 million or 35 or $40 million to do it. That the agreement is that we're going to have the operating impact in order to staff it. So,
but all our focus has been on FY25 and FY26 appropriately. But
Right.
in FY27, 28, as things come on stream, those impacts are not captured in the budgets as they're projected out through the financial plan. So
those will be enhancement requests.
And we also, where we are is, you know, 2 million to 6 million in staff. So those are enhancement requests on top of that in out years.
Those are not technically enhancement requests as much as that's what we believe we need to account for all the myriad issues that we've spoke about this afternoon.
Okay, and we're coming into the home stretch. I won't hold you for too much longer. The Northwest Library project received a marginal increase. I know that the site selection and community engagement portions of the project are complete. How have lease negotiations with the potential sites been going, and where do you estimate the site? When do you estimate the site being finalized?
Unclear, council member. Jaspreet, do you want to offer anything? I mean, there's no firm negotiation having taken place at this point. We're still in the evaluation phase. You know, any major lease is going to require some tacit agreement from the administration that they're going to take this on. Right now, we've been trying for years to get out of our one leased project, which we are leaving, the Parklands Turner Library, which we're spending upwards of $250,000 per year to lease that space. And we're moving into this property through a partnership with WMATA. We just have to be very careful about committing to a major lease in Edgewood Eckington without that same tacit approval that, yes, this is the right thing for us to do. And I need my board to be fully on. We haven't vetted this fully with the board at this point, and we would need to do that as well as with the mayor's team.
I mean, it keeps coming back to, like, everybody wants a library close to them and they are treasured institutions, but we got to fully staff them.
But, you know, they're not free, unfortunately.
Chevy Chase, there's a nominal increase for Chevy Chase, and it's different because the building is going to be built. So what is the true cost of building the library? I think it's different than something where the library is doing it from the ground up.
Absolutely.
But what kind of process do you undertake to make sure that we, the city, are bringing enough money into the table to ensure that that project can be great? And is the number that we have in the budget now sufficient? In any case, would your expectation, like, I hate to hear what you say, the mayor's going to kill me, but when you said that it's going to cost more, but we'll deal with it around one, is that how you see the Chevy Chase?
For Chevy Chase, I don't want to misspeak. This is a partnership between, DEMPED is running the show here, and the library and the community center have conveyed their requirements for their new facilities. Traditionally, this is years ago, the amount of money that we've got in the budget, 24 some odd $million, is sufficient for a new library, but that's no longer the case. Because of the complexity of this public-private partnership, I can't tell you, Jaspreet can't tell you right now whether what we have is sufficient. I think that will bear itself out over the examination of the various proposals, and we would take it from there. I wish I could be more forceful. I don't know, Jaspreet or Barbara, if you guys have anything to add there, but it's a complex project with great benefits potentially, and it just, it's also a little bit more ambiguous in terms of this, just the sausage making, as it were.
Yeah, so I mean, on this, I think the mayor and the council just need to be certain that we provide the funding, even if the picture has to come into greater focus. When the picture comes into greater focus, the dollars have to be there to make sure that we have a great library. There are other significant changes to the capital budget, including a reduction of 1.25 million in general improvements to bring it to 3.5 million in FY26. These funds are indispensable to making major and minor investments to ensure beautiful libraries continue to be reliably used, which became clear this year with the HVAC emergency closure at Bellevue that I take it should be reopened quite soon. What will the impact of this reduction be on DCPL's ability to make critical investments in the preventive maintenance space?
Joy, do you want to start this? This is a little bit more complicated in terms of the actual funding.
I'm happy to, Director. So in the current budget, the capital budget, there is 4.75 million in FY25. But in the 6-year capital budget, there isn't any funding in FY26 or in the out years. So the funding in the proposed budget in FY26 to 31, there's 3.5 million in FY26, which actually is an increase over the FY26 funding currently, but it is less than what we have in FY25.
Yeah, so I was at a hearing recently where I've been housing DHCD, where there was a claim of an increase, but it was because the previous year was one-time funding. And so then when money was put in for 26, it was an increase off of what was in for 26 in last year's budget, but a decrease from what was in FY25. And it sounds like I'm hearing something similar here. But the upshot of it is you have fewer dollars to respond to these maintenance needs. Or am I wrong on that?
There is 3.5 million that we didn't have in 26 in the current capital plan, and the 4.75 we currently have that is responding some of these projects. And maybe, I don't know, Barbara.
Have you used the 4.75 this year, or will
it is being used? I don't
It
know,
is
Barbara,
being
if you
used.
want to
Primarily, Yeah, the primary focus this year will be replacement of HVAC systems in some of the older facilities. And also replacing two elevators. One is Tacoma Park and the other one is Northwest. I mean, Northeast, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Northeast.
so I mean, I guess the question is, so there's 4.75, which is about what you, it sounds like, about what you needed and could use in FY '25. And is there some reason to think that the needs are going to be smaller in FY '26? I mean, Bill, it seems like the kind of thing, preventive maintenance is the kind of thing where you build in like a percentage of your portfolio in order to do preventive maintenance. Am I missing it, or is the expectation that we'll be doing less of that kind of preventive maintenance in FY '26 than we
Well,
did in FY '25?
we have a condition, facility condition assessment that we did some time ago that we were using as a guide for where we need to prioritize the use of those dollars. I'll say there's never a shortage of need, given the breadth of our portfolio is huge. So there's always things to be done, but we do have to prioritize with the budget that we have available.
So Richard, you
I
asked
mean,
us-
we just, we know we're going to need to request additional funding for the FY '27-32 CIP for sure.
Okay, yeah, I guess, I mean, question, you have a list of things you'd like to get to.
Yes.
And it's longer than 3.75
Absolutely.
million. Okay.
Yes.
I guess that's what I'm getting at. And,
Yes.
and I don't know how much longer it is, but actually other things are going to get added onto that list as things break and
Things
stuff.
age, and that's right.
So we want to you want to get caught up, and this is, okay. One of the kinds of maintenance that came up earlier in the testimony related to ADA compliance.
Yes.
Where does that stand? What's our ability to try to turn to those kinds of projects so we're meeting ADA requirements?
Sure. So again, we're looking at the same funds, pool of funding that we just spoke to, the general improvements. We did make a pretty significant investment in ADA upgrades. The main MLK door front of our facility was recently done about, feels like a year ago now. We've made some adjustments to restrooms at various branches to include MLK, but there is still work to be done. So we have a list of projects that can be with the proper funding addressed. But again, we're prioritizing the funds that we have, the pool that we have. ADA is important that we will address them as funding is available.
And I don't know, maybe we may have that list, and there's a lot of priorities, and I'm not sure that this is the kind of thing that we'd be able to turn to here, but I would like to have a sense of what's the maintenance backlog? What does that list look like? So if you could share that list with us at some point, I'd appreciate it. You talked about the fleet, so we won't touch that. So I'll end on IT. There's $700,000 cut to IT. What's it about? What impact will that have on you, or is that a thing you can manage?
We can manage it in FY '26, understanding that this is a one-year budget. We can manage it in the next fiscal year,
But we would need to have it restored in the next fiscal year.
So in the plan, there is $350,000 in 26, 27, and 28 with less funding in the out years. So we do feel the 350,000 each year over the next 3 fiscal years, we can manage that. We would want to work, of course, as we go into the next budget cycle to try to get funding in the out years, because a lot of the funding in that budget is used to help with IT infrastructure for even new buildings and existing buildings. So it would be important to increase it in the out years as we develop future budget.
Okay. All right. Well, I want to thank you all very much. I guess I'm going to reflect back and you tell me if you think that I'm missing things. So on staffing and preserving hours, a minimum of 2 million in order to stay open 7 days a week.
with reduced hours, with some reduced hours.
Right.
Yeah.
That's why I said stay open 7 days a week,
Correct.
not, but then 6 million to get to maintain hours.
Along with FTE in that scenario.
Authorizing. the
Correct.
FTE. So 6 million, including authorizing additional FTE. So that's in that space. Then in the collection space, sort of a minimum of, you can't go below where you were last year, but aspirationally more like 7, 8. But I mean, I don't see that, but trying to make sure.
Aspirationally, based on
Aspirationally.
demand, right?
Um, and then I'm not hearing a big call on the capital side. I mean, I'm a little bit concerned about Chevy Chase to make sure that that's adequately funded. I'm a little concerned about some of the snags, about potential snags about some of these other places, but I'm not hearing it on the capital
Yeah,
side.
I mean, I hate to be this way, but until we've got those, basically the bids in hand from our construction teams and the sub bids are in hand is when we know how much things are going to cost. We can provide estimates, but we're not going to say at this point, especially for some of those out year projects, that we desperately need more. But historically we have needed more, especially based on what we're seeing now with the volatility in the construction market and what we might foresee in the future.
Okay, great. And then in terms of Southeast Library and being ready to go at Southeast Library, there's another 1.2, or is part of that 1.2 the staffing?
Part of that 1.2 is that general staffing number that I had mentioned
So that could be
for the 6 million. Oh, not for the 2, correct.
not for the 2, but for the 6.
Yeah.
Okay. And then if you got the 6, which it's hard for me to
I get it.
picture, it's the 350 for the day one collections and 500 for the maintenance and landscaping and things like that.
Yeah, that's our request.
Okay. All right. Well, listen, thank you for everything you do. Thank you to all the witnesses who testified today. We're going to do what we can to try to protect you and strengthen you, but all sober about what's possible this year.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. It is 2:30 p.m. and this hearing is adjourned. Okay.